6:30.
Good evening. I call the meeting of June 4th, 2026 of Sammamish Planning Commission into order. Roll call, please. Hisham El-Khawat.
Here.
Mike Brasco.
Here.
Suda is online. Suda.
Here.
Sankrara. Mazahir Pulvalada.
Present.
And Ajay is... Ajay just joining us. Great. Any change to the meeting agenda? Anybody has any change to the meeting agenda? I'm sorry. I missed. Sorry. John Bugman, I apologize.
I'm here.
You're so close. Any change to the meeting agenda? Hearing none. How about the minutes of May 21st of the commission meeting? Any changes, any notes, any corrections? Hearing none, I assume approved with consent. Now is the time for the public. We have 3 minutes to make any comments that you have on non-agenda items. Who goes first?
Hello, I live in Tamarack, and I'm here to speak to the possibility of pushing to unblock the road down there. And I'm assuming some of you know about this issue already. I just wanted to tell you that just today I was driving home with my special needs son. He's 32 years old, big guy, and he doesn't really understand when they stop us and trying to get home. And it was just a situation where he needed to get home right away. And he knew how long it would take us to get there. And it was just, they stopped me for 10 minutes to try to even turn up of Thompson Road. And unfortunately, you know, I got out of my car finally. I said, I got to get him home. I got to get him home. And they were like, so they let me go just a little bit. And then they stopped me again. And then I just told him, I got to go. And then, well, you know, he ripped his shirt and was just tearing it to shreds and just really, really upset. And I just told them, I can't get in the car until you could tell me I can drive up this hill and to my house. And so I didn't get in until I made sure all the windows were unrolled. And I said, let me know when you're ready to let me go. And they said, well, he can get out of the car. I said, he can't get out of the car. He doesn't understand this at all. So then they finally let me go, and you know, barely made it home. Then he went to his quiet, dark space downstairs just to cool off. But all of that would have been just fine if I could have just got home. And there is another access to get there, and you all know what it is. And it's ridiculous that my family is suffering because of this. And I've spoke to this 3 times already to the city council, and I'd really appreciate it if you guys. I have not heard one single reason why it should be blocked. There's only one person I know of that really is 100% in favor of that, and I feel like it's kind of selfish of them to try to just take away a right-of-way. We all have access to that. We've been driving on that road for a long time. So please, please, please push them. I even have access to somebody that can take care of it for us, but we don't want to do that until we get the okay. So it's not going to cost anybody anything. Just let us know that we can have our right-of-way back and access the fire hydrant as it should be by law, legally, and have the right parameters to drive through there. So please, please, please do something about that. I mean, I've lived here since 1994, and we've never had this problem before. So please address it. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Who's next? Mary?
I arrived right on time. Hi, Mary Wichter, Sammamish, 25 years. I also live in Tamarack, but I'm going to ask a little bit wider. I want to strongly bring your attention to safety concerns and for your help to get action, which Issaquah, Redmond, Bellevue, and Kirkland have done for their cities. Emergency response for safety of everything and everyone is number one. Fire hydrants anywhere in the city should not be allowed to be blocked. No obstructions, no obstacles to access. Hydrants on the roadways to get there also need to be able to access anytime. Access should be unobstructed with no obstacles in the access roads or to the area. And without any access restrictions, since life safety emergencies might occur at any time on any day of the week throughout the entire year. Quick access means help and services can occur before the problem gets bigger or worsens. It will save lives, there'll be less health impacts, it will reduce damage, and it will stop potentially wider impacts. And there's been 2 fires in the last 3 weeks, one by QFC and one on Redmond Falls City Road yesterday. In Washington State, there are rules about don't park within 15 feet of a fire hydrant. But in the city of Sammamish, the parking rules do not apply for areas that are private roads, and 20% of the city has private roads. So the bigness of the problem is there's about 2,500 calls per year, but that includes motor vehicle and other category calls. There are 2,300 calls per year by Eastside Fire and Rescue for emergency medical, and with fires, whether they include structures or not. Just mathematically, if you flatten that, it's 6 to 7 calls per 24 hours if you spread out evenly across every night and day of the year. Also, typically multiple vehicles will respond, like a fire engine, a fire truck, an ambulance, and a police car or other aid vehicle. So you typically need space to work, and multiple cars or trucks are necessary. So not parking in those areas is super important. There are also 25 fire hydrants in the city between the Sammamish Plateau and Northeast Sammamish Sewer and Water District. And even if you did one of those or 200 of those, you just can't have them unblocked or not have them working. And one of the fires that occurred in Redmond was because there was not enough fire flow from a fire hydrant, and they needed a lot more trucks. I think 4 came, and now 149 people also don't have jobs or a place to work. Where I live in Tamarack, the roads are 20 feet wide. There has been new development. 4 houses took a really long time to build, off and on, and the obstacles have not been removed. In fact, they've actually been added. This makes our roads not drivable. Our through roads don't have turnarounds because they were through roads. They're dead ends now, and there's no way to make a turnaround. 20-foot access-wide roads have been allowed to be reduced to just 19 feet or 17 feet, or even as narrow as 10 feet wide. Yikes! While fire department resources, police, and other people highly qualified do their best, we just can't delay them. Let's open the roads.
Thank you. Mr. Jim Regner, please. Jim? Your schedule. Oh, agenda item, sorry. Jan Bird?
Also agenda.
Okay. How about Sue, Mrs. Hill?
Yes, I'm on an agenda.
Agenda item, all the 3 on agenda item.
Okay. Anybody else on
Paul?
the agenda besides me? Okay, because you could sure go first. I don't need to be first or last. Good evening, Planning Commissioners. Paul Stickney, Sammamish. I moved here in 1990 from the state of Montana. Learned tour for close to 12 years. I would spend 4 to 5 days a week looking at roughly 25 to 30 houses a day, and became really an expert, and still am, at virtually all single family and multifamily neighborhoods on the east side. Why I bring that up is I always liked these little connections that were sort of, I'm not going to call them odd in being strange, but just not what you were expecting. And one of the ones in Sammamish is just what they are talking about. When I got here in 1990, I could take that cut through behind and get from Inglewood into, Tamarack. So it's been there all that time. Now, when I was in high school, the high school career fair said, you should be in marketing and you should be an attorney. Well, I never went to work as an attorney. I do some marketing in real estate. But one thing I'll say about attorneys, virtually all cases are based on fact first before law comes. Law comes because of stories. It doesn't come out of thin air. And what I want to add to that is, in support of their position, the story is it's been open all this time. There's a lot of precedent there. So I don't know who should get involved with this, but I do know that what's going on is not correct and not what has been for a long time. And I had no intent to speak to that, but I've heard this so many times. So now, jumping on to a couple other things. I sent some things in today to you guys that I believe are inspiring and exciting if we understand it a bit, but I'm not going to talk about that. I'm going to reach out and see if you'd like to meet, have a cup of coffee, and chat. But two things. One, from two weeks ago's meeting, I've been thinking it might be interesting to add a supplemental thought on a transmittal to City Council on the 24A docket to suggest that the City Council could have the right to add more than a single site land use, only them, with the caveat that all 7 have to vote. It might not be used much, but if anybody would need something like that, it could be them. So anyway, I just tossed that out there and appreciate the chance to speak. Thank you.
Thank you. Gabriela, anybody online? Oh, I'm sorry. Who? Not in here, not on this list. Oh, I see. Okay, who's next? Sorry about that. Who's going to go next? This is about non-agenda comments.
Good evening. My name is Karen Walker. I've been on the Sammamish Plateau since 1971. Yeah. I lost my home 2 years ago in our windstorm, and I'm trying to rebuild it. And I'm here to bring to light that our home was a little over 1,400 square feet. We're taking it to 23. We're adding 2,500 square feet. Average home in Sammamish is 28 to 32 since 1990. I am not a developer. I'm trying to put my life back together. And the affordable housing fee is affecting me financially and hardship. No, my insurance company did not give me the amount of money I deserved. I'm asking the city to reevaluate this, make me just an average home. I'm not taking up any more density. I'm not adding new units. I'm not building for profit. We're building our home, one home, not 10, not 20, okay? We are not increasing, like I said, in density. We are not generating a profit. The fee for $34.95 per square feet under the current rules, 1,500 square feet are exempt. Thank you very much. A need for 725 additional feet reaches only a modest 2,300 square foot home. The result is about $25,000. It's not covered by insurance. I didn't get plan this for my future. This happened overnight. This is affecting my future for my retirement, my granddaughter. I've been on this plateau since 1971. How many of you guys can stand in this room and say that? I've seen growth. I grew up here. Just not mentioning the temporary housing I had to go through. I've moved 4 times. The construction inflation is affecting me. Permits and regulations and engineer cost is affecting me. These fees become significant hardship on us. Why? I would like the city to consider 2,000 square feet to be exempt. 1,750 was talked about last time, but I'm still a modest home. I'm still affordable home. I'm not 2,800 square feet or 35,000 square feet. I'm still affordable housing fee home in the city of Sammamish, which to me is still Issaquah. I still remember my phone number. I went to Sunny Hill School. I went to Pine Lake, Issaquah High School. I was a second class in Pine Lake. For you guys that don't know, Pine Lake, the first wing burned down the first year it was built. Okay?
Well, thank you very much. You're over a 3-minute time.
Oh, thank you. I would like you guys to reconsider it to 2,000 square feet. Thank you very much for your time.
Anybody else that has comments, non-agenda item? Unfortunately, this one was an agenda item and we missed it. Anybody else has any comment, public comments that are not related to agenda item? Not related.
We have no hands raised at this time.
Okay, thank you. So we go to agenda item and discussions. We have 3 different topics to talk about, and first we're going to be having the staff presentation, and we take it from there. David and Evans.
Good evening, Commission. David Pyle, Department of Community Development. With me this evening, I have Evan Fisher, who's one of our senior management analysts in the department. This evening, we have a continuation of conversations we've had on 2 topics. One is a new one, I think. The first, I don't know what the order is. We have the 3 topics are the inclusionary affordable housing fee and how it applies to home additions. The second is rezones, quasi-judicial rezones, and when they should be permitted when properties are encumbered with critical areas and what percentage might be appropriate. And third is a proposed amendment to the city's comprehensive plan as it relates to regional growth centers and wanting to acknowledge that the language in there is misplaced and that we need to correct that.
Thank you, David, and good evening, Planning Commission. With that introduction, I'll just go ahead and we'll move right to the first of the 3 issues. And Chair, if it makes sense to you, I think we could just do one by one. We have a few slides about each, and then we'll stop for discussion before doing all 3.
Yes.
Very briefly, though, we want to just walk through a history of the topic. Right after when we were approaching adopting the 2024 comprehensive plan and the development regulations, we as a city thought it made sense to submit a docket request to potentially clean up any implementation things we needed to with the code or comprehensive plan. So this work falls under that docket item. In February of 26, the council was considering a few cleanup code issues under that docket item and brought these items forward to look at. At least 2 of them. That's correct. There was an additional topic of considering adding large mammals to the species of local importance. That issue has since been resolved, and David could maybe provide a little overview of what that is. But that issue is resolved. On April 14th, though, the council did ask for further commission feedback on the criteria for the quasi-judicial rezone and exemptions for affordable housing program requirements. So very briefly, just to encapsulate what this work is and isn't, the council is pretty clear. They're looking for issue-specific, focused feedback on these issues. They're not looking for any analysis on the validity of the affordable housing program or the quasi-judicial process. They reaffirmed their support for those on April 14th and are really hoping for targeted feedback on some of the specific policy questions. So that brings us to the first, which is critical areas and the criteria-based quasi-judicial rezones. This process is meant to allow property owners to change zoning when certain criteria are met if they're within the same land use category in the future land use map. It provides the city opportunities for potentially achieving higher densities that could support middle housing development. And as an FYI, a quasi-judicial process is a court-like proceeding, and in this case is meant to determine if the criteria are met, and it's done by the city's hearing examiner. And actually, I'm going to back up just one second. So the question here, really, the focus of this, the discussion is on the issue of properties that are encumbered by some percentage of critical areas, and if those properties should be eligible for utilizing this rezone process. So very briefly, we do have a full set of critical areas regulations, which are updated along with the comprehensive plan. The three that concern us in this scenario would be the landslide hazard, wetlands, and streams. Those three critical areas come with their buffers. So landslide hazard, you need a 50-foot buffer from the top or the toe of the slope. Wetlands would be 50 to 250 feet, depending on the wetland type and the habitat type associated with the wetland. And then streams would have a 50 to 150 foot buffer depending on the type of stream. And then there's a building setback from all those buffers of an additional 15 feet. So those are the protections that are already in place under the code. And this chart here gives us a sense of how many parcels we're talking about that are, we think, eligible for the criteria-based rezone based on some of our GIS mapping analysis, and to look at how, of those parcels, how encumbered they are by critical areas. And in blue, currently, we're saying that parcels encumbered at least 50% or more would not be eligible for the criteria-based rezone, and that's approximately 176 parcels. So, yep. Oh, yeah. Yep.
Thank you. I'm just trying to understand the data. So 176 parcels fall under the less than 50%, you said, right? And it's less than 75. Is it 176 plus delta getting 204? Or is 204 the unique number on the less than 75? I'm trying to understand. Is this a progressive number?
It's the total, yeah.
So each bucket has like 176, 204, et cetera, or it's 176?
No, they build on each other.
Yeah, they build on each other. Thank you.
Is that an accumulated basis? That's what you're saying?
Right, yep.
It's an accumulated
Thank
basis.
you. Yeah,
Yes.
thank you.
Good question. So this gets us to the feedback the council is looking for. The issue statement here is ultimately, is rezoning a property that is encumbered by critical areas appropriate? And the policy questions are, should properties encumbered by critical areas be eligible for this process? And is there an amount of that property that, if encumbered by critical areas and their buffers, would essentially disqualify them from the criteria-based rezone? Currently, the code is set at 50%. The council posed the idea of, should we reduce this to 20%? Should it be 0% and let the critical areas rules govern if they should be eligible for the criteria-based rezone? Or is there some other criteria we should consider? And with that, I will turn it over to the chair and the commission for discussion.
Okay. Who's going to start? John?
So, Evan, in your last point, whether it should be zero, I was just trying to imagine sort of different scenarios here that why should we restrict at all, considering we already have very strong critical area protections. And there could be a situation where a rezone allows maybe one or two more units because of lot line adjustments or whatever. So I think just the fact that we can rely on our critical areas ordinances. The downside might be reasonable use exceptions. I'm getting little tiny nods, and maybe you could speak to that. But I think at this point would be, why have any restriction? That would be my sort of open question.
When you say restriction, you're talking about restriction beyond those that would be applicable because of the guidelines that we have for the natural boundaries and,
Right.
and things like that, right?
So the last sentence there, should the amount be 50% current, reduced to 20, and I'm saying, given our critical areas protections, why not just make it zero? And maybe staff might have some thoughts on that.
So would you like us to respond?
Yeah.
Okay. I just want to make sure there were no other comments on that first.
Well, I have a comment on that. So I know I'm remote. You might not be able to see me, but I can't see you guys while I'm on the video. Is it okay to ask my question?
We can see you. Chair, what?
Oh, absolutely.
Yep, go ahead.
Okay, I agree with John on that, because if it's 100 acres, right, and the 20% would be whatever, like 2 acres or something, if they want to build something in there, why should we even restrict that? It depends on the size of it, and if I want to put a shed on whatever half acre, I should be able to do that. I should be able to rezone that. We should give the citizens the opportunity to come to the judicial process. That's my opinion, because we are already having the critical areas ordinances. We're not just leaving it and asking everybody like, you can do whatever you want to. We're still following those rules. So I would agree with John on 0%. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mike.
Mike, go ahead.
Thanks for seeing that. My hand was wasn't sure how that was going to work. Hey, I think it's also helpful to understand, and David and Evan, correct me if I'm wrong here, but what happens during the quasi-judicial process? And my understanding is that the examiner considers things like topography, the critical areas, access and traffic, the infrastructure capacity, compatibility with neighborhood scale and intensity. So there's other criteria that come into play on whether a person who owns a plot of land and is requesting consideration for a rezone will actually be able to be approved for the rezone. And the critical areas and the protections, the buffers that are around the critical areas are one of those. But I think if we only focus on that, we don't consider the full breadth of the criteria that actually would be considered by this quasi-judicial process. So as I think about that, there are these additional, I'll call them considerations and protections that we don't have development that is inappropriate, whether it's because we've got critical areas that are, part of that property, or, issues around access and traffic or infrastructure. So I would agree with what John was saying for those additional reasons.
So these are great questions and great points. I would say if you could toggle back, Evan, to the slide that showed the criteria. One of the challenges here is that we do not want to find ourselves in a situation whereby we rezone a property and then are faced with telling someone that they are unable to develop it and have to do a reasonable use exception. So one of the objectives that we had in setting the rules as you currently see it under G2C, is that the property is not more than 50% encumbered, and 50% of it's buildable, if you will, and that the lot size that is the minimum lot size or standard lot size for the zone in which you're proposing to rezone to is achievable. Because what we're trying to do is to not rezone to substandard lot sizes. We don't want to rezone something that then results in us having to grant variances or deviations, or where it's really difficult to fit normal development into that lot size, if that makes sense, which is why we included this table here. You could eliminate the 50% requirement and just rely on the table that they have to demonstrate buildable area equivalent to the standard lot size listed here, because that would ensure that they have a viable development area on the property. We don't want to be rezoning properties where there is not a viable development area. That was the premise behind that. So that would be one option. We do have new critical areas rules that meet all the new best available science that goes along with them. And we do wetland and stream regulation fairly well. We're doing much better with geohazards than we have in the past, given the new regulations that we have around geohazards. I would say, though, that in responding to Commissioner Bresco's comments, that the criteria are fairly limited. The original criteria that was proposed back in November of 2024 included some additional requirements related to stormwater and those sorts of things. This is the criteria here that's listed that the examiner would evaluate against. So there is no traffic analysis, if you will, and there is no stormwater analysis. And the argument that the community members that commented on the code, the draft code at the time in November and December of 2024, was that this is a non-project action and there is actually not a development proposal in play, and therefore there is no analysis to be done about a possible development proposal. Therefore, how could you be evaluating a potential rezone against a development proposal that doesn't exist? So that is one way to look at it. You could recommend to the council that there be additional criteria added here. You could require, for example, that there be a demonstrated stormwater connection so that the property could drain. We do also not want to be rezoning properties that are landlocked, that don't have the ability to drain the site, meaning that they don't have an easement or a right-of-way to drain into. So you could require that the applicant provide information about viable drainage paths whereby we could connect stormwater to. Another one would be is that the subject site has adequate transportation connection, meaning that it, in some cases, our city's public works standards requires that when you get over a certain number of lots, you have to have 2 access points. You can't rely on a single road to service the site. So that would allow for that high-level analysis to be done, whereby we're making sure that properties that are being rezoned, where additional density could be added, are on a high level able to meet our public works standards, meaning that fundamentally, if you need 2 access points, you have 2 access points, that kind of thing. Obviously, there would be transportation improvements made that would go along with the project. So we can't always analyze a rezone based on a future project because we don't know what traffic or transportation infrastructure improvements might go along with it. But it is generally seen to be very hard to obtain a new connection later to a different road. So looking at that up front might be something important. I'm trying to respond to Commissioner Bresco's comments here, and that would give the community and the examiner some additional requirements to look at and to consider when evaluating a property as if as to if it should be rezoned to the next higher zone.
Let me just, maybe a quick follow-up on that. And thanks for the clarifications, David. And this may require a little bit more discussion and debate than the simple question that we're asked to address, whether we go to 50% or 20%. But what you just described, that it's developable according to the lot size requirement and a couple other criterias like, the traffic that could be done easily without like a huge cost and time, this kind of criteria, that feels far more defensible and logical to me than simply saying, well, let's have 20% or 50% as the number that we're choosing. I don't fully understand all the complexity that would be doing that there's some simple elegance in just saying, okay, it'll be 20% or 0, whatever. But the criteria that you mentioned are those things that really do control the development. So if it was possible to get those put in a way that was easy to implement, not overly time and cost burdensome, I think that's worth considering.
Ajay?
Yeah, I have a couple of clarifying questions on this thing. So the first thing is that, let's go back to the numbers over here. If I had an R1, then what you're saying is that has a buildable area of 43,560 square feet, and by more than 50, it is not encumbered by more than 50% of being a critical area, right? So obviously I would have had a bigger lot that is this one more than critical, then I have 43,560, which can become an R1 or an R4 when I divide it by 4, and so on and so forth. Have I got that number? Have I got that correct?
Yes, however, I do want to highlight that this table is misleading. There is a bit of a drafting error here. That first row, row R1, should not be there because in no instance would you ever be rezoning to an R1.
Correct. Got it. But that's a good baseline for me because then when I make it R4 or R6, I'm able to divide and get to the point. So that was great that it was there. I would say if you're removing it, please just put a note in there to say an R1 would be 43,560 because that's really good. It helped my brain understand this better. That's number one. My question to this is that let's go back to what Commissioner Bachmann said, which is that why is it that we are saying that it's 20% or 50% and so on when we have already identified this as something that is buildable? Is that because we want to give it a little space? Is there some reason to it?
Right. So there's several reasons for it. The first reason is that although we have critical areas regulations, there's been a lot of study over time by State Department of Ecology about the appropriateness of density adjacent to aquatic resources. So I would say specifically aquatic resources, there is some level of sensitivity where you're generally going to be discharging water, whether it's through it's generally treated water that will be discharged to a wetland or a stream, and there is that opportunity for degradation. So by adding that additional layer of protection, you're attempting to move the density just a little further off site from sites that are constrained by wetlands and streams.
But isn't that but part of the quasi-judicial process itself, which is that they're going to help us say that, okay, this is the thing, rather than for us to come up and give a general number of 50% or 20%, which might seem very arbitrary at this point. So I was first of the opposite opinion, but then as Commissioner Bachmann said, I started moving towards that to say, hey, the quasi-judicial process is there to tell us this thing. We have an expert to tell us this thing. Why are we giving a general blanket number, which then also encroaches on what the quasi-judicial process should do?
So the quasi-judicial process is generally intended to be objective, criteria-based, number-driven, as opposed to subjective and qualitative. So by keeping it in a certain percentage, it is very easy in a binary sense to understand you either meet it or you don't. And that was the intent behind the rules initially. When we start to veer into the land of evaluating things that people might have a different viewpoint on by their own lens, understandably, that's where disagreement comes into play. So by keeping it very straightforward and number-driven, it keeps us away from having the types of debates that tend to lead to more intense disagreement. You either meet it or you don't. And if you wanted us to veer into the more subjective territory, we could do that, and we could try to come up with things like traffic and, but those are all speculative based on a future development that's not even presented yet, which makes it challenging. So what we initially looked at was, first of all, if you go back to the numbers of lots, there are not that many of those in the city that are actually eligible under 50%. If you go up to 0, there are quite a few more lots that are brought into the mix.
But we don't know all the numbers, right? The gentle lady who was speaking about being here from 1971. Mm-hmm. And I have been here only 13 years, and I have seen the city change. I have seen the city become very different than the city that I came into. So not too different, but then very different from the city that I came into. So what I'm struggling is that I don't have all the metrics to say that, okay, let's put a really stringent rule, and then let's go ahead and change it, because that seems a little bit backwards. Why don't we start with what, like Commissioner Bachmann said, which is to say, okay, let's start with the most lenient one, and then figure out if we need to grow this if we have some substantive numbers for it. And that's where I'm standing on this one.
And I think that the then council in November and December of 24 heard both sides of that and landed right in the middle. They removed the requirement about stormwater. They changed the requirement around critical areas. We originally said if it has any critical areas on it, it should not be eligible. And they moved that to 50% after some debate. And they had the same conversation you all had, but they found that on balance, we should start with some precautionary principle, and that we should try to look for opportunities where these rezones could occur, and really try to minimize impact to the community.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Dave, I just want to clarify something here. Is the question literally, is it 20 or 50, or is it open for conversation?
I think whether or not we have the rezone process is not open for conversation.
I get that point, but 20 or is the question just 20 or 50, or is it open for a conversation?
From what I understand, it's open to broader conversation about additional criteria.
That's good. This way I can speak, because if it's 20 or 50, I'll pick a number and then stop. Because I know that you had the concern that we tend to start getting off what you actually asked us, and it doesn't help you said. So I'm trying to just respect that too.
Thank you.
The quasi-judicial, it's my understanding that it's a streamlined process to help people who wants to rezone, correct?
Correct.
The alternative is to go through the docket system, which is a lengthy, more time-consuming process.
Correct.
Okay. I go back to where Commissioner Bachmann started, that we believe that we have solid criteria set in place, that if we follow them, we will be safe. We will be in a good position. And if I have a process that will streamline and help my fellow neighbors, Sammamish residents, get their homes and their properties rezoned and get their homes built faster, I will definitely support that 100%. One of the reasons I work in construction, I spent the last 35 years working in construction, and we all know how the cost continues to go up. We all come to these meetings here and we talk about affordability. The longer it takes to decide, the more expensive it becomes. And unfortunately, we're living in times when I say it becomes more expensive, I'm not saying it goes from $1 to $1.25. It goes from 1 to 10. It goes significantly. It can kill what you want to do. And if we can streamline it, let's follow the criteria that we already have. The properties in Sammamish, no two properties are the same. I might have a critical area in mine and you might have a critical area in yours, and both are 50% of our property, but mine is in that corner and yours is right in the middle, which makes yours not buildable more than mine. So let's not lock people out. Let's just go with the zero and let the process work its way. I know that you will need to go and change some of your codes, but it will help the public more.
So before I go into my details that I have notes I've written, I just want to understand, when you say 0%, you mean, I'm trying to understand, does 100% or 0% in my mind mean the same thing? I'm trying to understand what you mean, because we are going from 50 to 20, which means we are making it less restrictive, like if, right? So you're saying to make it even more, we're making it more restrictive. Okay. So you're saying 0 is less restrictive, so it's the other side. Okay. So here's some comments that I have prepared, and some of it may be repetition of what you guys have just said, but just bear with me. I'm not trying to jump here. So continue allowing properties encumbered by critical areas to participate in the quasi-judicial rezone process. I agree with that. and still retain the existing 50% threshold rather than lowering it to 20%. And here's my rationale I have. I believe that a 20% threshold is a little too restrictive for Sammamish, because a significant portion of Sammamish property contains wetlands, streams, steep slopes, buffers, or other environmentally sensitive features, and lowering the disqualification threshold from 50 to 20 would likely eliminate many other viable infill or transition parcels from consideration. So you're saying like construction would be more expensive. This could reduce flexibility in implementing the comprehensive plan, constrain housing supply, create inequities between similarly situated properties, and push growth pressure onto fewer parcels. Existing environmental regulations already provide protections, I believe. Even if a property is eligible for rezoning, development must still comply with critical area protections, buffers, stormwater standards, tree retention, SEPA, etc. So rezoning does not override environmental protections. Is that correct? Yeah. So retaining 50% preserves flexibility while recognizing constraint. I think the current 50% standard appears to strike a reasonable balance. Parcels predominantly contained by critical areas remain ineligible. Parcels with developable portions can still be evaluated case by case. As you said, right, different parcels may have different cases. And the city retains discretion through the quasi-judicial process. So that's my kind of recommendation and my views on that. Some of it may be repetition of what you guys said, but sorry about that.
So, I've got follow-up, I guess, after the conversation here. So, Evan, could you go back to the code page? And comments from David, I think, have helped me. No, the one with the actual code language. Okay. So I like the idea. I still like the idea of not restricting anything if it has no restriction if it has critical areas on it. But David's comment I thought made sense in terms of keeping the minimum developable area requirement, because as you said, the quasi-judicial process is very quantitatively driven, and having, okay, I want to come in with a big parcel that's got a lake and wetland on it, but it's still got enough that I can go to this R designation and achieve some housing or whatever. This is all residential, and meet all of the critical area requirements. That said, then my next question is that section C seems to imply that the applicant would have to have a critical area study done as part of the rezone process, because otherwise you wouldn't be able to tell how much critical area is on the land.
Correct. You would have to have an inventory done that shows boundaries and buffers and whatnot, and it would have to then be surveyed in, and you'd have to provide a site plan. A basic inventory site plan, not a project site plan.
Okay. Yeah, exactly. But you'd still have to have that critical area study done. So maybe the code language. So if we go towards no restriction regarding critical areas, but you have to have a certain amount of buildable area, and you need to do a critical areas study so we can determine how much buildable area there is or isn't. I guess the thing is to try to avoid one of those reasonable use nightmares that could come up. Is that fair?
I think it's fair. There's a bunch of different ways to look at this, and we're really trying to do multiple things here, which is to streamline the process as was discussed, and to try to cut down on costs, to try to provide for community members who own property here opportunity to develop their property. And most of the applicants that we've had have have been existing property owners for rezones. They might have maybe a developer that's in mind down the line, but they are the property owners that are rezoning. So we're trying to do that, but we're also trying to not end up in a situation where we rezone someone's property or let them go through the rezone process, then they end up with a property they can't develop. That's not fair to them either, because they've invested a bunch of time and money in the rezone process, and now they're faced with the prospect that they can't even develop it. And that's what I'm guarding against. Is I admittedly, selfishly, don't want to have to deal with cleaning that up later, because we likely will get sued.
Can you give me an example of that? How can you make such a mistake that you rezone someone's property and then they end up with a property that's not developable at all?
So the issue there would be is that if we don't have this criteria C here, then all you're left with is you're adjacent to the next highest density.
But you are not AI. You are a human. You are David, who knows all the codes. When you rezoned this property, you know the consequences of what you are doing. You could not have done a mistake like this for someone to end up with a property that's not developable.
But that's not. But if this is criteria based, and
but I still get it. You will still apply this criteria. I'll come to you. You will apply this criteria, but you are going to tell me. But if I do all this, you will end up with that, and this you will have an unintended consequence. I don't think this is the majority of the cases that you will receive.
It may not be, and if you wanted to eliminate it completely, I have no heartache over that. We see property owners do, some things that are fairly astonishing. So, I'm just saying.
I know, and I know we have talked about this in the past, that you see things that I don't see, and I keep going back to that. Those are the odds. Those are not the majority of the people. Those are maybe one in.
That's fair. Yeah. I would not disagree with that.
And you will always have those. If you have these rules, or whatever rules you will put, you will have one of those people.
And you know what they say, we always remember the worst situations in life.
I know, but we can't apply those situations to the general, to the overall.
Okay, David, I have a series of questions. Question number one, I heard you saying that when the rezoning goes through the process, regardless if it goes through the hearing examiner or is that the only way?
Or the other way is the docket legislative process, yes.
That when you go through the hearing examiner, at least based on my experience, the hearing examiner looks at lots of things, not only the critical areas. You mentioned some of them. You mentioned, for instance, transportation, access, land use, easement, stormwater, and so forth. So why can't we quantify those instead of going with what I'm hearing from the rest of the commissioner, instead of picking up a number for 20 versus 50? Why can't we put some numbers on those criteria that makes more sense to the public, that, hey, if you go through the rezoning, this is the implication of the transportation system, this is the implication as far as the water, this is the implication of the connection and so forth. Why can't we do that?
Because most of those items are unit-based, based on a development proposal, which there is not one at this point as part of a non-project action.
And for the applicant, what would be the advantage going through the rezoning through the quasi-judicial versus docket? Which one?
Time, efficiency.
Is that time the only issue?
It's also the quasi-judicial process is supposed to be objective, whereas the legislative process can be at times subjective based on political objectives.
And Isham brought up a good point that you affirmed what his understanding was, that 50 versus 20, but there could be your understanding that the council would be possibly by, if we go with somewhere in between. It's not a matter of black and white, either 50 or 20. It can be basically scaled.
Or it could be eliminated.
Or it could be eliminated. Yes, that's the case.
that's the case, I think the council's looking for
So it's
feedback
not a black
on
and
that.
white.
They're very eager to hear this conversation.
Do you
So
know where the magic 50 number or 20 number came from?
the 50 number came from trying to balance objectives as part of the November and December of 2024 conversations that the council had on the quasi-judicial rezone
That
criteria.
was not based on any technical, any.
It was
they picked up from
based on at the time trying to compromise between different parties who had different viewpoints and identifying that 50% of the property is encumbered. That's a good starting place. We could always turn the dial. So here we are talking about turning the dial.
And when you look at the nearby jurisdictions, how they handle it, the other cities around us.
They all have different processes. Some
Give us
don't.
the extreme on both ends.
Well, the one that I remember, and I haven't extensively researched all the cities, just for clarity. The one that I remember was for example, in Bellevue for a period of time, there was a restriction that you were not eligible for this type of rezone if the property was encumbered with any critical areas at all. And part of that is sensitivity of the site. And that's part of the conversation we're having right now is, but I think that Councilmember Stewart, for example, on the 14th made a very valid point that if I had critical areas on my property, I would not be able to rezone. But if I was immediately adjacent to a property that had critical areas by way of a matter of feet on the property line, then I would be able to rezone. So at what point is it really not working for us?
And the other question is that have we had actually a case in the past dealing with this issue?
We do have, I think,
When was the last one?
6 rezone applications underway.
And went through the process, no problem?
The first one has made it through the process. The hearing examiner did rule on it. It was called the I-Ride rezone, and that's actually where this conversation started. Was there were community members that have concern about the appropriateness of that property to be rezoned from R1 to R4, and that although the city's regulations do identify wetland, stream, and landslide hazard areas and associated buffers, and that property does in fact have a stream on it with a buffer, it is not more than 50% encumbered and does have the standard lot size of buildable area. Therefore, it met the criteria. However, the community members that participated in the hearing and provided comment were very concerned about the property being composed of an older stand of trees that was fairly diverse, that has a lot of niche opportunity for habitat on the site, and that it might be one of the last remnant land bridges that would connect the upland to the lake across an area that otherwise had been developed on either side, and that the city's standard here was not reflecting the value of that property as habitat, and that we should consider changing these rules to better reflect properties that might be habitat. The challenge is that a property in and of itself that is habitat is not considered as undevelopable. We don't regulate habitat like we regulate wetlands or streams or their regulatory buffers. Instead, we really focus on regulating habitat in a way that is protecting the features on the property that are associated with life cycle needs of the species that have been identified as using that property. So that's a lot of information. That's where this all comes from.
But at that time, you didn't have the 2050 regulations. So
at that time,
you
we
had a
had
series of subjective criteria.
At that time, we had these exact rules in place, the 50% criteria. And we did, yes. However, because habitat is not listed there, we list wetlands, streams, landslide hazards, or their associated buffers. And because habitat is another category of critical areas, which is regulated somewhat the same but differently, that the hearing examiner, when reviewing the criteria and making the objective criteria-based decision, ruled that the property should be rezoned because it met the criteria.
What do you think about the idea, instead of going with the numerical values, go to maybe back to those criteria, specific criteria that we have under current critical ordinance, but add a severity, the degree of severity to those individual items that we have under critical areas.
So
High, medium, low, something like that, you know. So you have some kind of quantitative numbers, but you don't have a magic number of 20 versus 50. Scaled the impact of...
I think it does again become subjective
Even if
in how you
assign-
scale it, because we don't use scaled. I mean, you could look at habitat rating for wetland, the habitat score on a wetland rating form, but then how would that be done for a stream? Because a stream doesn't have a rating form like that. It's really hard to implement. What we were trying to do here is create something that was streamlined and that wouldn't get hung up in an endless cycle of debate about the qualitative components that were subjective and were subject to different perspectives and different lenses that people had when looking at it.
Let me give you an example so you know where I'm coming from. Pick up a steep slope. The degree of a slope could be looked at and measured as far as the impact, as far as the severity.
And we do. 40% slope is considered as
There's a number.
regulated.
There's a number right there.
And there's a number with a stream. When a stream is, a certain type F, then there's a 150-foot buffer, right? But those are all applied through the critical areas regulations. And one of the comments I heard here is that why don't we let the critical areas rules do their thing? And that when a development proposal comes forward,
maybe increase it, make it more quantitative. Use that. I agree with John, but kind of put some numbers into it.
Into the criteria here. If there was a way to do that you all agreed on, and we had a majority direction,
But I want
we
to
would
hear from
consider
the
that.
fellow commissioner.
But you did give us a numeric way to do that, and that's with developable lot size. So if you took out the minimum, maximum critical areas and required a critical areas study inventory and a minimum buildable lot size, you'd have quantifiable data.
Which is what the intent of the table there is,
Yeah.
right?
But it would take out the 50%.
But it does address degrees of severity as you,
Exactly,
so it is written into the standard lot size.
But maybe expand on this to make it a little bit more palatable to the city council. So we're kind of moving away from the idea of 20 versus 50, but we basically, what is the word that I'm looking for? Make the existing guidelines more, not applicable, more measurable.
I'm thinking. But I don't know how that would look like. I mean, we could explore that if directed by a majority.
I want to hear from my fellow commissioners. What do you think?
So I
Meet him somewhere in between.
Yeah, so I have one small clarification on this thing. Again, I'll go back to the table, and I know you don't like that first line of R1 and you want to take that out, but just let's keep that for a second, right? Are you thinking in terms of, because we kept talking about the quantitative, that is what we want to give to, or the defined one, which is what we give to the quasi-judicial process, versus the qualitative part of it. Is there a qualitative part of it if it becomes an R4 versus an R8 and so on? Is there a component to it which makes us think that, okay, I need to now define 0% or 20% or 50% because it changes if it were an R1 versus an R4 versus an R8, because there is usage that changes, there is a common area that gets used, some things like that.
So the primary differences between R1 and R4 and R6, R4 and R6 are really very similar, is that is a different level of tree retention requirement. So there is more flexibility to develop the property. When a development proposal comes in later, right, the rezone's non-project, and that enables a development proposal later to be filed for review at the city, right? When you move from R1 to R4, there's three primary things that you're doing. The first is you are changing the zoning requirements, which include tree retention, hardscape coverage, and density, right? Those are really the big ones, right? So you can cut down more trees in R4, you can have more hardscape in R4, and you get more units. Those all line up because in order to get more units, you need more hardscape and you need to be able to remove more trees.
But we don't tell people have at it, right? We
Oh, no.
tell people
Oh,
that,
no.
yeah, there is, when you're going R4,
Ask any
I'm not going to let you
developer.
do something
We
more.
do not, yeah.
Yeah, so we are already defining over there. So I think we have regulations when we are rezoning between.
Well, this is where, what I say is that the qualitative part, the review of severity, the real analysis comes when a development proposal is brought forward where there is a high level of scrutiny. The question about whether you should be able to rezone from R1 to R4 or R4 to R6 really is about the high level premise of density. Like, should you be allowed to go from R4, which allows 12 units of middle housing, to R6, which allows 18 units of middle housing, right? So there's an increase in density occurring, but you can only achieve that increase in density if you can show that you have adequate stormwater, you're retaining the trees, you're limiting your hardscape to what's allowed, your floor to area ratio and building envelope is limited, you're meeting all of the city's traffic concurrency requirements and building required traffic improvements. All these things come with a development proposal, and it is, from my experience, not likely that they will ever achieve the maximum density granted under middle housing.
There we go. Isn't it? Because we've already defined all of those things. So they're not going to do that.
They're already defined. That's what I'm saying is this is really about a criteria that opens the door for you to jump from R4 to R6 and whether or not the property that you're doing it on is at a real high level appropriate to do so. Do you have water and sewer? Is the property encumbered with critical areas? Do you have a standard lot size to be built on?
So I somehow feel that we are trying to regulate for the exception rather than the rule.
And that's what Sean was saying.
Oh my God. There we go. I think that's the discussion then. Because I came to his point from somewhere else.
Well, the buzzword that I saw in the staff report is that, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, David, is that the council is looking for measurable. Now, measurable to some people means quantitative numbers. But you can also...
Yeah, exactly.
So...
Or just removing the measurement altogether.
Yeah.
Well, I'm trying to meet you somewhere in between. I said that severity, you can measure the severity of the...
So I just want to be clear that there are varying perspectives on this in the community. There are some members of the community that really like the quasi-judicial rezone. There are some that it's fine, they don't really see an issue with it. And there are some that have a lot of concern about rezoning and change in the community that might come from it. And I'm trying to be really careful here not to try to drive this conversation because I don't want it to be perceived that staff have an agenda. We're really here trying to understand that our comprehensive plan allows this tool, that this tool would allow for some additional middle housing to be built in the city. And any development that would happen would have to meet the full range of development regulations that apply to it when a development proposal is brought forward, and that would ultimately end up with a project that meets our zoning requirements just like any other project in the city. And there's, again, varying perspectives on how effective those are. It depends who you are and what your experience is.
So, David, I'm going to put you on the spot and saying that based on the conversation that we have had so far, what is your taking as far as the official position of the Planning Commission? I'm sorry.
I was going to add, but no, you can finish. No, go ahead. I'll wait.
What is your understanding?
If I'm reading the room, I'm hearing that we should remove the criteria C altogether, but retain the standard lot size box because that is really the best measure of intensity. That's what I'm hearing.
Here.
I just want, again, before I kind of make my mind up, I just want to ask a couple of questions here as follow-up. So you just say that this quasi-judicial system is in place right now. And I think you mentioned there are 6 or 7 of them in process right now? 5
in process, 1 that's been finished.
Yeah, I think that's right.
So 1 has been done, okay. again, the way I think about it is, the Highcroft project, which some people really hate, and I am one of those. I don't want any rules in place which allow something like that to happen.
That will never happen again in the city.
I know. So I kind of gravitate back to that, saying, hey, would this quasi-judicial process allow something like that to seep through? That is my biggest safeguard I'm looking for, because,
because we did such a good job with our zoning controls when we built out our middle housing regulations, we have a wide range of restrictions that go along with it, whether it's floor to area ratio, whether it's hardscape, whether it's building footprint, whether it's trying to think of some of the others, tree retention, whether it's our stormwater rules that go along with it, that these all work together that ultimately drive the form of development. And when Highcroft was built, we had none of those in place. We had a 5-foot perimeter setback, and we had a 35-foot building height, and you could basically build anything you wanted within that envelope.
And by the way, on the record, I'm not blaming the people who live there, or I'm not against it. I'm just saying that's something that is a sore project that shows up in people's mind all the time. So yeah,
it's also a highly sought after community to live in because of the size of the buildings, as I understand it. So there's that too.
Yeah.
I wanted to apologize to Sudha and Mike. Mike, what's your position? And then Sudha. Mike?
Well, I thought David summarized it pretty well.
Yeah, same here.
At least I would have said that same sort of thing. So he was, as best as he could read the room remotely, he did a great job.
Don't give him too much credit.
So just so that I understand, you're saying we can lose C to G to C.
G to C.
And just have the table.
Just have the table. We would retain the table. We would retain the second part. Has a buildable area equal to the standard minimum lot size in the zone, which is requested as provided in the table below. Yeah. We would keep the R1 row.
Thank you. Thank you.
I think you made Ajay very happy.
Hey, I would just also jump in. The conversation just now about Highcroft and what has changed in the code since Highcroft was planned is really significant. And I think, as I think through all this stuff, it mitigates or reduces or maybe eliminates concerns I would have about what I would call really inappropriate or stupid development. We've got good codes in place that meet the needs of Sammamish, and those have been refined over the years. So, when we look more holistically, I feel pretty comfortable about, I think, where we're getting to, at least in terms of what to suggest over to council. And I know we're going to have some continued debate and public hearing on this in the future. So we're not quite finished yet.
So do you have all the information that you need?
Yeah, I did want to follow up on that though, because I really appreciate that comment. And I also want to point out that in the first 10 years of the city, there were virtually no changes made to the zoning regulations. In the subsequent 15 years, starting out slowly, there were a few, but most recently in the last 10 years in my time here, and I'm not attributing to me at all, I'm attributing it to the community being involved and engaged with with local politics, with the planning commission, with the council, that we have been much more nimble in responding to some of these issues that have come up. And I advocate that community members that have concern about development keep coming to these meetings in order to help inform us of these issues so that we can be nimble and be responsive and make changes.
So can we move on to the second item?
Sure.
Sorry. Go ahead. No. So we go into the second item?
Yep. So topic 2 is exemptions from the affordable housing fee in lieu requirements. And as a reminder, the city in the end of 2024, as part of the comprehensive plan's adoption, also adopted the mandatory affordable housing program, which requires 10% of all new housing to be affordable, but does provide options about how that requirement is met, including a fee in lieu program. The fee in lieu is required for fractional units, including new development that adds square footage to existing structures over 1,500 square feet. And this was conceptualized as a tool within the city's toolkit to help realize affordable housing and shift land economics. This slide just gives a little context on the projects impacted by the requirements so far and some of the revenues secured from the program. And now we get to the topic slide. So the issue statement is, are there scenarios in which home additions should be exempt from paying the affordable housing fee in lieu as required? And the policy questions the council really honed in on kind of cover two scenarios. The first is, you could think of it as a new build scenario. So should exemptions from the affordable housing fee in lieu requirements be expanded from, which it is at currently 1,500 square feet to 1,750 square feet? The next would be more around additions. Should exemptions be added for additions for aging in place to provide reasonable accommodations? Should a one-time addition be allowed that is no more than 15% the size of an existing dwelling unit or up to 400 square feet? That particular line was provided by Councilmember Stewart to help give a point of conversation. Should there be a greater allowance for additions in the case of a rebuild due to an act of nature or a fire? Or I think it's fair to just ask the question, should additions altogether be exempt from the fee in lieu program? And with that, Chair, I'll turn it back to you for conversation.
Okay. Who wants to start?
I can go.
Go ahead.
But before I go ahead, I just want to know, we had public comment earlier in regarding to this item, but are we having public comment right now? Or what are we, I mean, what is the process? I want to understand.
At the end of the meeting,
at the end of all that, like, we're not doing one by one, we're going to go to all three. Okay, just want to make sure. Okay, thank you. Before I start off, first of all, I want to say I really empathize with the lady who talked about earlier from 1970 when she's lived here, about what happened with the winter storm. I really feel for you, and I think others in the room too. I'm really sorry for your loss, and I hope you get out of it soon. So my recommendation is support targeted exemptions for modest home additions and aging in place improvements while ensuring the exemptions are narrowly tailored to prevent abuse. Number one, on the increased exemption threshold from 1,500 to 1,750 square feet, I would support that recommendation. The rationale behind that is that the existing 1,500 square foot threshold may no longer reflect current construction cost, modern household needs, and inflation in family living patterns. A modest increase to 750 square feet does recognize multi-generational living, functional family space needs, and the reality of home sizes in Sammamish. This adjustment is unlikely to materially undermine affordable housing fee revenue. Second point about aging in place exemption. Again, here my recommendation would be to strongly support. This is one of the strongest policy arguments in the proposal, allowing reasonable accommodation for seniors and residents with disabilities. It helps residents remain in their homes longer, reduces displacement pressure, supports accessibility and public health goals, and aligns with compassionate community planning. Examples may include a first floor bedroom, or a wheelchair accessible bathroom, elevators or lifts, or expanded living area for caregivers. I would, however, suggest some guardrails. For example, require medical or accessibility justification, owner occupancy, and reasonable size limits. Number three, the one-time 15% addition up to 400 square feet. Again, here I would recommend support with safeguards. The rationale being a modest addition allowance is reasonable for growing families, home offices, caregiver accommodations, or basic modernization. The 400 square feet cap is important because it prevents large luxury expansions from escaping fees while keeping the exemption focused on modest additions. Suggested safeguards here could be that it's only a one-time use, owner-occupied homes only, and not applicable to speculative redevelopment projects. Finally, on the greater allowance after fire or natural disaster. Again, here I would strongly support. The rationale being residents rebuilding after catastrophe should not face additional affordability fee burdens simply to restore their homes. This is especially important as climate-related risks increase, which is what we saw with the winter storm that we had a couple years ago. Again, here I would suggest some conditions. Replacement structure substantially similar in scale, time-limited rebuilding window, and applies only to involuntary loss events. These are my suggestions. Thank you.
Okay, who else is going? AJ?
Hey, what was the last phrase that you used? Only apply to what?
My suggested conditions were: one, replacement structure substantially similar in scale; second, time-limited rebuilding window; and third, applies only to involuntary loss events.
Thank you.
Like the storm, for example.
Okay.
Yeah, so I have a couple of points. I agree with most of what Commissioner Poonawalla said. I have some things. Suddenly, in situations, people reach situations where you might have to make your house more accessible. You might have to do something in the house which is different from this, or like the gentle lady mentioned, the natural event which caused us to do this thing. Having to go back to where it was prior to this is not a reasonable expectation. We could have had a house which was 1994. We're looking at a house that is getting rebuilt in 2026. That's more than 30 years apart. I changed my mind in 30 years. The market definitely changes its mind in 30 years, right? So we cannot put that restriction on the homeowner to say that this is the thing. So I would suggest that we probably don't do that, this one. The second part of it is that if there is a need to make my house more accessible and to make changes to my house to be more accessible, that should be taken into consideration. At this point, with a general stipulated rule, I find it even less likely that that's the thing, and it comes up with a burden. Like, for example, if I were to say, I'm going to increase the space of my house just because I want to have some space for a wheelchair, because I'm having an elder family member come into my house, my mother or somebody else come into my house, there is already a burden on me as part of a familial unit, which is what a bedroom community like Sammamish is known for. And on top of which, if the city says, oh, no, we have this restriction to do it, that becomes another problem. I would rather not like the community to have to face through that situation where it goes through that requirements. I would say we should get rid of that. And the third thing that I was going to say is that I don't understand what the reasonable accommodations is for aging in place, especially because what is reasonable to me is not reasonable to even my wife. So I really doubt if we'll find a good measure of reasonable accommodation, and we'll be back here saying, oh, whom do we go to? Is it a quasi-judicial process? Is it not a quasi-judicial process? So I would say that if we were going to do it as to aging in place, let's define it as aging in place, or to say that we're making it accessible and leave it at that, and not make it reasonable or unreasonable and so on and so forth.
So I do want to highlight, just because the term came up, that reasonable accommodation is a specific legally defined term in our code, and it is generally subject to medical provider's note as to the need. So what happens is somebody provides a letter from a medical provider and they are granted the exception based on that need. And there's some federal law around that as well. So we are obligated to allow for that flexibility. They're not required to get a rezone. It's a fairly simple process. They are required to provide some personal information that is always not the most pleasant to provide. And generally, as you said, in those instances, they're not really doing it for a happy reason. They're doing it out of necessity. The aging in place one, I heard the term not senior. That was, I think, John, you offered that, that if maybe it's offered for seniors, and if we defined that, if there was an aging in place for someone that qualified, that we would then allow that to occur. That could be the guardrail. So that's one option. So I'll stop because we haven't heard from everybody, but I wanted to identify that reasonable accommodation is a legally defined term, and we do have a process in our code ready for that.
I can jump in.
Go ahead.
I'm going to ask the same question I asked from before, because I attended the city council meeting, and I know you asked the city council to be very specific to the question to us, because we can go off track. Is the question 15 versus 1750, or can I talk?
definitely talk, because that what we're not tasked with doing is questioning.
I'm not going back to the policy.
The premises of the program.
I'm not going back to, but even the 15 versus 17, I remember you asked City Council to be very specific to the commission, otherwise they will keep debating among themselves. I attended that. I logged off, I think, after 11 p.m. So let's go back to this. Whatever we end up deciding, it needs to be the same across the board. Like he said, reasonable accommodation, I know it's a legal term, I know you have to use it, but we need to define it. Should there be a greater allowance for additions in the case of a rebuild due to an act of nature or fire? If I look across there, this is open for debate and this is open for legal issues. 1750 and 1550 are not reasonable and are not realistic in today's terms. If we're going to lock it, my recommendation, 3,000. That's the reasonable minimum, in my opinion. You can tell me, nope, and that's okay. But in my opinion, 3,000. Again, let's not design these codes to protect us against the very few that they abuse them, because they will still figure out a way to abuse them. But let's help our fellow residents, the people that, I keep going, that they made Sammamish that we live in today. Like she said, she has been living here since 1971. She earned a lot of credit for what we are enjoying now. She did that. She's one of those, they did that. Like the people that we talk to, that they live down the street here. We live here, we enjoy this because of them, because of how they protected it during the last 50 years. The least we can do to them is allow them to rebuild their lives and to keep their lives in the best way. Not limit them to 15 and 1700. That's World War II area sizes, when people are coming back from the war and we were trying to build homes for people to start their lives, but not in today's terms.
So I don't know that those two are directly connected. So what I'm going to explain that is I like the term involuntary reconstruction. Thank you for that. So when a homeowner is faced with involuntary reconstruction, they are allowed to, under today's rules, rebuild with the current size home that they have, and they are not required to pay an inclusionary affordable housing in lieu fee, right? If they are enlarging it above 1,500 square feet, then they are required to pay per square foot above 1,500 square feet. That one option would be under the involuntary construction component to not require any fee at all. There are so few of those in the city, and not set a threshold and say that if your home is destroyed and you are going through involuntary reconstruction, you're given a pass. And that was where I think Councilmember O'Farrell landed in her guidance, was that she felt like, really, this is a totally different topic. When someone's home is destroyed and they're reconstructing it, they should not be, and we have so few of these, that it's not something that really impacts the program. It's a completely different topic. That was her perspective on it.
Can I ask you a question on that? Let's say that my house was burned down and it was 3,200. Are you saying under the current guidelines, I can reconstruct it up to the square footage that I had before? You're not allowing any additional because I'm exceeding the 1750?
No, you can build more, but you are then so if your home was 3,200 square feet, under today's rules, you would be able to reconstruct the home at 3,200 square
but
feet.
But then pay extra for the extra square
But if you wanted to go to 400 square feet,
4,000.
Sorry, another zero. If you wanted to go to 4,000 square feet, you would be paying $34.45 per square foot on 800 square feet.
Okay. What is the policy right now?
That's the policy right now. That's the policy.
You won't pay
You
the
won't
fee
pay right
to
now.
right now.
You
You
don't
won't pay the fee if
But
you are
if
building
in that
back.
example, I paid the difference for that 400
Right.
square foot.
Again, so if you're, I'll make it real easy so I get the numbers right. If your home was 3,000 square feet and your home was destroyed and you were doing involuntary reconstruction and you were rebuilding it back as 3,000 square feet today, then you would not have to pay you would not have to participate in the city's inclusionary affordable housing program. If you were enlarging the home beyond 3,000 square feet, whatever size, we could say you're making it 4,000, then you would be required to pay per square foot on the difference above 3,000 square feet at a rate of $34.45 per square foot. So in the case of smaller homes, now we have many smaller, older homes in the city that if they were destroyed and they were going through involuntary reconstruction, and the same thing I told the council is that I've also come to understand that it doesn't make financial sense to reconstruct at that same smaller size. Your needs are different than they were then. You would not voluntarily reconstruct it exactly how it was, unless maybe you were completely enamored with the building. But it's unlikely, and in which case you are, plus it's not financially responsible to do so with a small home in today's housing market. You would build it back as an asset, as an investment into your life, and you would put it back in a way that matches more community trends and what's being built in the community. So on the one hand, you could exempt it altogether, and those are so few and far between. They would happen maybe once a year, maybe once every 2 years. You get one of them. Very low number. Not an impact to the housing program. From my perspective, that is the cleanest way to do it. As someone who is in a most stressful part of their life, going through something that is horrendous that I would never want to go through, it's just one less thing for them to worry about. They can come in and go straight through permitting, rebuild their house, involuntarily reconstruct their house.
By the way, Evan, you had the chart showing that the $34 that we have in Sammamish. Do you have that chart showing what is comparable rate in the other cities? I asked you to bring it in.
Yeah, I do have it. I will just remind us that it's really not relevant to the conversation, but as a point of information, I can go to that slide because we're not talking.
Why is that relevant? Because
we're not talking about the fee amount. That's not what the council asked us to focus on.
It doesn't apply to any of these?
Well, the fee amount is set, and we weren't asked to debate the fee amount. But as an FYI, here is the slide with other jurisdictions' affordable housing fee dollar amounts.
And just to be sure, this really varies because of inputs, land economics, other costs that go along with that. And it's going to vary location by location based on housing markets, based on land values, based on other factors that go along with development. And there is a model that was used to generate this fee and was used to generate other cities' fees. I think Kirkland's missing, Newcastle's about to adopt one. So there are other fees missing from this table.
And how often we update this?
We just adopted this in February of 2025, so just about a year ago. So we're not due for revisiting this for a bit of time, although we would like to reconsider this probably on a 5-year cycle, somewhere around that time frame.
Thank you.
So just that in that table that Evan was just showing, or that this one that Evan was just showing, it's at 3445 for new units, 1,500 square feet and additions. So if I had a home, just to keep our example, I had a home of 3,000 square feet and that got burned down or something happened with it, and if I brought it back to 3,000 square feet, I'll pay $0 because I've added 0. But if I make it 4,000 square feet, I'll pay for the 1,000 square feet at $34.45.
Correct.
Right. That's correct, and this is where when Hisham was talking about if you go back to the list of questions, they're all related, but they're not directly related. The one, for example, the involuntary reconstruction one is one that I think you all could talk about and come up with something pretty quickly on. The one up above about whether or not the exemption threshold should be raised from 1,500 to 1,750 or even 2,000 as was recommended, and we've heard others say 2,500, and Hisham raised 3,000. There's a wide range of options there, and those really drive housing outcomes in the city. And I will say that the purpose of this program, the inclusionary affordable housing program, and specifically the in lieu fee component of that, is not to collect money. That is part of it. But the purpose of the program is to serve as an incentive, as a carrot and a stick, and another tool that we have to really work on getting smaller units being built in the city. The challenge we have as a community is that, by and large, I've seen a shift in my time here where we've gone from 3,000 square foot homes to 4,000. Now we're in the 5,000 to 6,000 square foot homes. We've got some 10 and 15,000 square foot homes in the permit process right now, and the sizes just keep going up and up and up.
There will always be those that will build the 10,000 and the 20,000. Okay, there are people smarter than me who can afford those. The majority were the 3,000. 2,800, 3,200. There will always be the mix, and it's good to have the mix. We don't want them all to be the same.
Right.
But at the same time, I heard council saying that this is a way to preserve those older houses. With all due respect, I disagree. This will not preserve them. This will just make someone angry, and they will pay the fee, and it will make it very hard for them, but they will do it. The way to have an inventory of smaller houses, let's encourage the middle housing. Let's encourage more of those. Let's build smaller, newer houses, but let's not restrict people with penalties.
So I think that's what the 1750 is intended to work on. So we've been working with master builders and with the building community, and we have heard from them that it is a very viable product to build a 3-bedroom, 3-bathroom home in a 1750 space. We don't charge a fee on unconditioned space. So you could have a flex space like an art studio or a workout room or something that's considered as unconditioned space. We don't charge the fee on garages. So you could end up with a duplex that has a 4-car garage, 2 and 2, with 2 1750 conditioned space units with a flex space. And that is a product that they think that the community here, that the market here would sell.
Which is completely okay, and we want to see more of them. But those that they want to build the 3,000s, let's not penalize them. Because at the end of the day, this program was supposed to be towards developers, so that when they build 10 units, they give you the 10th one and they keep 9. And it's shifted to individuals, that there's no way that they can give you an affordable unit. They're building a house for themselves. Let's not make it that hard for them. Let's give them the 3,000. If they go with the mansion, if I'm building a 10,000 square foot, I'll pay you the penalty. I won't care, because at that level, it's pennies for me.
So I'd like to jump in and go through the list. And we've still got Mike and Suda to go too. I'll try to be brief. I'm fine with the 1750, and in fact, I live in a house that's smaller than that since 1990. Lifting any limit on the involuntary rebuild, I think, is a wise choice going forward. And then some of the last ones, the aging in place, you didn't tie in implications of an ADU. So if you came in and did an ADU for aging in place, you could add, what is it, 1,500? 1,000. And that would be exempt. So there's some subtleties in here that haven't been played out too well. Not that I don't have any solution to that, but I think the ADU aging in place thing and accommodation. The reasonable accommodations, obviously, you've got a defined process and ADA kind of implications there. So I'm good with 1750, elimination of any sort of rebuild fee for involuntary stuff, and maybe sussing out the aging in place and reasonable accommodations.
So, John, are you saying if my house burn, I can rebuild it to 3,000 without any fee?
Exactly.
But if his house is in a very bad shape and he wants to tear it down, he cannot build to the 3,000 square foot. That's not fair. I get it that if mine burned,
Yeah.
it's, I don't want to call it unfair, but it's my bad luck. But if his house is in a very bad shape and he's rebuilding it, he and we are neighbors. Why I don't pay and he pays? He's rebuilding it because it's in a bad shape. It's not because he just likes a fancier house. And that's why I'm saying increase it for all. The disability. If you become disabled and you need to accommodate a disabled person, 400 square foot will not do you anything. Between storing the wheelchair to the bigger room, to the bigger hallways, to the bigger bathroom, to the bigger everything, to the bigger ramp, 400 square feet will not do you anything. That's why I'm saying take it to 3,000. Allow everyone to go there. At the end of the day, how many smaller houses are in Sammamish? The people that they build 3,000 are the people way younger than me. Those are the people that they want to start families. And those are the people that they don't have that much money. They will probably build it themselves, like the guy who came here last year and he said he's building it himself. Those are the people who need the 3,000 so they can raise their kids. And let's make it easier for them. Our schools are running out of kids. Let's make it easier for them to come back, to start families here. You told us here that the peak we are seeing now in the schools, it's 3 years and it will be gone. Why will it be gone? Because there are no younger people. Because why? Because they cannot afford it. Let's make it affordable for them.
Because the community is aging out. Yep. So one option, again, I'm just trying to add some options here based on what I'm hearing, is you could, per the last question, choose to exempt additions altogether. An example of that is, after all the great work you did on impact fees, the City Council recently adopted the new impact fee code and the new impact fee schedule. And one of the things that's included in there is additions are exempt from paying impact fees. So in line with that, you could be consistent with that and say that additions in the city, regardless of origin, are exempt from paying an from participation in the inclusionary affordable housing
But again,
program.
I go back to my construction background.
Put a cap.
Many times it's cheaper to demolish and rebuild than try to fix.
So add another one that's all new starts only new starts are required to participate in the inclusionary.
No, I'm saying they do not.
Well, what I'm saying is new starts, meaning not a tear down rebuild. New start, vacant lot, construction, multiplication, new units, all those would be subject to it.
But then you are only limiting it to someone going and buying an existing house. But if you gave me a piece of land and you told me to go and build on it, you're telling me I have to. That's why I'm saying 3,000, one that fits all, and we move on. Otherwise, we're going to split hairs. It's just we're going to get into a lot of different scenarios that we won't be able to cover.
But Hisham, the problem with doing that is, if you understand the spirit of why this was put in place, was to encourage, like as Davis pointed out, right? If a builder is building home, he's building 10 homes, we get 9 homes he sells at market value, and that one affordable home we're trying to get out of it, right? So there's a number that the council wants to achieve, and there's a financial burden behind that number that we need to achieve. So somewhere that money has to come from. This is one way to get that money. If you take it from 70 to 53,000, that the amount of revenue now you can get through that lieu fee, whatever, now goes down because you've increased the number to 3,000, right?
I really struggle to understand how keeping it at 15 to 1750 versus changing it to 3,000 is suddenly going to cause that revenue gap that you're talking about. I think that comes only if there is a new construction. That kind of spawning comes with the new construction, and that's where we should look for that.
No, but Hisham is saying not just for new construction. He's saying for every home that gets built, new, redone, if it's up to 3,000, don't have a fee.
Yeah, because after 3,000, sorry to say this, but after 3,000, if I'm building something over 3,000, I'm building it for vanity. That's a different concept, right?
Agree.
So to keep it at 3,000 is fine. 1,500 to 1,750, today, in many cases, that may not be a feasible one. That's number one. Number two is that this is not going to have, I really struggle to understand how many houses, how many such things will come which will help us fill that gap of the revenue that you're talking about.
So Ajay, if you look at the new town center townhomes or whatever is being built, they are under the 3,000 square feet. Now, we would not get any revenue out of that in all those new homes that are just being built right behind the street here, right?
Remember, he said the goal is not to collect money.
Yeah.
That's where we started. The goal is not to collect money.
It's not the only goal.
Oh.
It is big.
But he also said that it's, again, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to make you this one, but he also said that for the ground up new, I think you used a term for that, right? Ground up new construction and all those things. And that, it's understood. You want to build it at that, and that's fine. But if I have a house and I'm trying to make it to keeping it at 3,000 is a much more reasonable one to work with.
I'm okay with it, Ajay. I'm not okay with Hisham saying it applies to all, even new construction. That's where I am. If I have an existing home, like Syed said, if I have a 1,500 square feet home and now I find it's very small, I want to make it to 3,000 to meet the today's standards or whatever, okay to get an exception. But if I've got a lot of 10 acres lying around out there, I'm building 30, 40 homes on it or whatever, and they're 3,000 square feet home, and you just give me an exception.
No. If you are building 40 homes, then every 10, you are doing the 10%. That's different. I'm talking about if I'm building a house for my family.
Oh, single home. Okay.
Yeah.
All my conversation is about
because you said
individual.
Blanket. Okay, so you're saying only for single.
I'm not talking about developers at all.
Okay, then that's fair.
Yeah, the blanket for single.
Sorry, I missed that point. I thought you said for any new construction. Sorry. Okay.
I want to give a chance to Mike and Sudha. Mike, do you have any comment or question?
And I thought you were going to call on Sudha first.
Sudha, go. Because her screen went black. No, because her screen went black. That's why.
Hey.
Oh, she's back.
Yeah.
I've been here, Chair.
So for the developer building in Sammamish, so this is new construction, which is what I think the first bullet is referring to. I like that 1750, and the master builder supports that, and it supports making it a little bit more affordable to build a somewhat smaller unit or smaller home, and so it moves things in a direction that we want, and so that's new construction, developer led. The others, where I've been at in the past, I think probably not too different from where Hisham is. I'm a homeowner. It's my property. I should be able to do what I want. And, without paying those fee in lieu. However, there is that concern that, David, we met and did a prep meeting, I guess yesterday. And what we don't want is people just really expanding beyond all belief, even if it's their property and all of those kinds of things. So, Mazda, you had some wording when you went through each of the bullets that provided some, I guess, constraint against the, rampant, I'm going to make this huge mansion, to replace the house, to add on to the house I have. So anyways, where I'm at, definitely we should eliminate the requirement if there's a rebuild due to an act of nature. I struggle a little bit with the exact wording we should have if I'm doing an addition, whether it's to accommodate aging in place or other reasons for wanting to do, an addition. But I would like to see us enable that without the fee in lieu up to some point, and maybe it's 3,000 square feet. Or Mazi, if you had some language that helped to put some guidelines on that, I think that would be helpful.
Okay. Sudha?
Thank you. And the first one, is that for the only developers, not for individual people building houses?
That would be considered a developer. So,
Okay.
from our perspective and the way rules are applied is it's really hard to differentiate between someone's, standing as to whether they're an individual or whether they're, we can't control that. So we really try not to get into the business of judging whether someone is putting on the hat of a developer, putting on a hat of building their family house, because we've seen those hats change in the middle of the process.
Gotcha. Okay.
The exceptions again.
Okay. So
I'd
in
say
that
that's more the
case,
norm.
the developer is the more the norm. Okay. Well, I do understand Hisham's concern about if it's an individual resident doing that, we are going to charge, especially after Karen Walker talked in our public comments. I was calculating that was exactly coming around $23,000 for her. It's a lot of money. It's a lot of money. So I'm okay to change that to $1,750 to $2,000, and I'm even okay with $1,750 on the first one. And the second one with the aging people in place, I'm good with that because we should support our seniors. The third, I'm okay. I'm not even sure about that 400 square feet. You could get barely an office, maybe one single bedroom with that. Should there be a greater allowance for additions in case of a rebuild due to an act of nature or fire? Yes, definitely. In that case, Karen Walker, who came to the public comment this evening, I don't think she needs to pay anything extra, or does she need to pay because she was at 1,700 square feet and she's trying to change it to 2,200? David?
Yes, that's the current situation. And she has a building permit, and she did pay all the building permit fees as well as hiring an engineer to redesign or design stormwater and all the other things that go along with designing a home. So there are quite a few costs that they have had to account for in the redesign and reconstruction, involuntary reconstruction of the home.
Okay.
Okay, who's going next? John? John, do you have any?
I think I already gave my summary.
Okay, I have a number of questions. Question number one. First of all, I'm comfortable with the first bullet, and I kind of take the same position that somewhat close to what Hisham was talking about. Probably we should be increasing the cap from 1,750 to 2,000, possibly not necessarily to 3,000. The second one, exemption for addition for aging. There is no reference to addition square footage. Do we want it to leave some numbers there or just any size? When you say addition, what is the addition? So
That's the question posed to the commission.
What does it mean aging?
What does that mean?
What does it mean aging? I'm 30 years old and I want to age in this place.
Yeah, aren't we all aging?
I'm aging. How do you define aging? You don't have to be 70 years old to be called aging. I'm telling you, you are putting yourself for legal issues. That's why I'm saying, make it one size that you apply to everyone. Otherwise, you're going to get into lawsuits. People are going to say, I'm 30 years old and I'm aging. I want to age here.
Right, and it currently is one size. It's 1,500.
So anyway, that's the question. The third, one-time addition allowed. One-time addition allowed per per parcel or per applicant? Which one? Per parcel, which means that once somebody get it, no matter how many owners come and buy that property, they cannot come and
I guess it depends on how restrictive the commissioner would like to be.
What is the policy right now? Do we have this?
We don't have, I mean, this is a new potential addition
this
that doesn't
potential.
exist. Yeah.
We do have this in many other areas in the code. For example, with relationship to critical areas buffers and an increase in impervious surface in a critical area buffer, a property is allowed a one-time 1,000 square foot expansion into a critical area buffer. There's an allowance for that for existing development. So that's an example of how this currently is applied in our code in other categories.
So how are we going to leave that? Just leave it the way it is?
Hisham's proposal was across the board. If you raise it to 3,000 square feet, this would no longer be, it would become moot because you've now raised it to 3,000 and simplifies it.
Yeah. And I bet you many people, they won't even go to 3,000. Probably most of them, they will end up about the 2,500 themselves.
What would be potential implication if that is a position that we're taking? And I realize, and Hisham is absolutely right, there are always, no matter what the rules and regulation are, people find to go around it. But don't plan it for exceptions. So what would be potential ramification if you go with the one?
Right. The implication would be, well, I could start with the effect that has on land economics. Now it is somewhat diminished by keeping it at 3,000, far better than 4,000, because one of the challenges with smaller units being built is that, according to builders that I've talked to, and I actually met with a broker this morning that was telling me the same thing, is that as long as the larger units are predominantly what the market is bringing, land economics do not support, land values do not support construction of smaller units. And that as long as the city is not trying to pull back on the size of the units being built, builders are always going to chase square footage because that is what can get them the maximum return. And when more and more square footage is built, then the land values go up along with it. And that is really the biggest driver in whether or not market affordable housing can be built.
Is that our motivation here?
That is one of the things that this is trying to achieve. So one other thing to keep in mind, and this is a bit complicated, and usually when I talk to people about it and have the time to explain it and talk through it, not in this type of setting, they usually walk away understanding it. But from our perspective, the way our rules work together, whether it's our middle housing rules, whether it's the inclusionary affordable housing requirement, whether it's our other zoning controls, whether it's our allowance for the rezoning that we were just talking about, is we have what I call the housing ecosystem. And the intent there is for us, through a series of rules and sticks and carrots, for us to try to push builders into building more smaller middle housing types that are seen as market affordable. Market affordable middle housing, from what I understand, is really in the 3-bedroom range. And that is what we've been working with master builders and some of the builders in the building community to try and understand what is the square footage requirement for building a 3-bedroom townhouse unit, duplex, triplex, whatever it might be unit, is how much square footage do you need to do that? That's where the 1,500 originally came from. We're hearing now, after we've worked through some possible projects, that 1,750 is really the place to be. And what that does is it promotes builders building smaller units. So if you were faced with, as a builder, and this is what exact conversation I had with the broker, is if you were looking at building a 5,000 square foot new home as a custom home builder, or you were presented with building the same 5,000 square feet in a triplex, which you're allowed to do in Sammamish, but you didn't have to pay the in lieu fee, that might tip you over the finish line in favor of building the triplex with the 3 units. Whereas if the in lieu fee was not there, you would be tipped in favor of building the large 5,000 square foot home. So this really is a deciding factor when they're modeling these costs and looking at the bottom line. Builders are taking note of these fees, and they are a determinant about how they proceed to move forward with different housing product types.
So in the other words, if you go along with what Hisham is saying, that go to the 3,000, do you agree that that would actually reduces the time and makes it much easier for the applicant to go through the process?
No, I wouldn't say that. I would say that what it does is it changes the whole dynamics of land economics in a way that would probably land us more in the duplex category. 2,500 square foot duplex would become the product that they might look at as compared to a 5,000 square foot single family home, because they still would be subject to paying the fee at the 5,000 square foot level. It really depends on the product, and the challenge there is that 2,500 square foot duplex unit is probably not as market affordable as a 1,750 triplex unit. So what happens there is we're not pushing down into the level that we understand there is really more of a community need for entry-level housing, whether someone wants to downsize, whether someone's kids want to move back and buy their first starter home. That's really what we've heard about over the years that we're trying to achieve.
But David,
Hisham, can I interrupt for a second?
Yeah.
Since it's 8:30, I move that we extend our meeting. I'm going to draw a line in the sand to 9:15.
I second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, seconded. So if I go back to my thought, David, developers will pay the fee. We can pretend that they won't. They will, because they have an avenue to pass it to somewhere else. The individuals will get burdened with the fee because they don't have anyone else other than themselves to pay it. So 2,500, 1,750, 3,000, the developer is not eating that cost. He's passing it.
Not going to disagree.
And I'll go back to what Commissioner Hisham used as an example in this thing. If I'm trying to build a house where I'm not 30 years old, so I'm trying to age, right? And I want to have a much more accessible, this one, I'm not thinking of a duplex. I'd like to have a bathroom or a room in the same floor that I'm in, wider doors so that I can have a wheelchair go through and all of those things. That's the individual. And that's the construction that is happening for the individual. And you are ending up charging for that individual a lot of money, which is intended to discourage a builder from building obnoxiously large homes. So what I would say is that 3,000 then is a good number to go with, to say that even then it doesn't look like you need it if you're trying to build something for yourself. But at the same time, it gives you that much of grace. And yet, if you're a builder, your hunger is not going to be satiated with 3,000 anyway. So you will end up paying for it more on that. So that's how I walked back into what Hisham was saying.
I have been here for 10 years, and I've seen how market prices go. Developers, whatever they put, people are going to pay for it because they don't have an option. So they will pass it. You will take the 10th one. The remaining 9, they will take the value of the 10th one, they will spread it, and they will sell it. People will still buy it because they don't have another option. Let's not make it harder for the individuals because we are trying to stop the developers from doing what they were doing.
So Mike, Sudha, do you have any comments on what we're hearing? It looks like that there is seem to be support at least on this subject as far as going from 1,750 cap to 3,000 cap.
Well, in my mind, 3,000 is actually luxury. You know, it's a huge house. 1,750 is like for the starting, you know, small family. You know, that's where I started with my 2 boys. So 1750 to 2000 is more reasonable than 3000 from my perspective.
Mike?
Yeah, I think from what I understand in terms of the motivations and hearing from master builders as well, that 1750 makes sense for that new construction.
That's where I am. Yeah, 1750 is fine with me.
Well, I tend to agree with the 1752. So at this point, it looks like that if we vote, it would be 5-2.
5-2. You guys should have sat on this side of the room.
Not tonight. Do you have enough information and direction?
So I think the first one and the second to last one, we have information on, and I think we can move forward with that. And again, that's a dial, right, that could be turned. But I think Hisham's proposal, as I understood it, is if you went to 3,000, then the second and third bullets would be moot because you'd have already achieved that. But if we're sticking with 1750, which for the purpose of the program that I'm tasked with implementing, and as I understand it, what our obligations are under state law under HB 1220, sorry, we do. This is really challenging, and I'm not going to try and pretend that this is not an easy task to just solve. I understand all sides of this, and I agree with largely everything that's being said here. But I think that if we're going forward with 1750, we also need to understand whether or not there should be some form of exemption for additions. So, for example, you could say that you just focus on the third bullet, that there be a one-time addition be allowed no more than, you could set that as you see fit, 15% of the size of the existing dwelling or up to 400 feet. I think there were some good comments that were initially raised as part of this conversation.
Also remind you of my question, that is that one time or parcel?
One time for the life of the parcel.
It doesn't say that.
It could
one
say
time
that.
what?
That's a good recommendation. Well, we could add that.
So which one?
Doesn't it say one-time addition?
No, one time per parcel, one time per
one time per parcel
owner.
or one time per owner. Yep, got it.
Well, I can argue on
Should be
both
per
sides.
parcel, right? It should be per parcel. I think that's what the recommendation is. It should be.
Right, and we do have other rules in the code that already mimic that, so or operate under the same lines.
Let's be more explicit, right?
Okay, how about the bullet number 2 that Hisham again was very passionate? What is the definition of age?
Sorry, Syed, if I may, I know you guys had a different view on the first bullet. If we want to reach a compromise, if we look at bullet number 3, if that number were to be increased for a one time to kind of meet to somewhere closer to 3,000, because right now it's at 400, so if you're going from 1,500 to whatever with 400 square feet exception, you're only reaching about 2,000. If we made that number instead of 400, say 1,400 or 1,500, then you would kind of reach to the 3,000 level, wouldn't you, for the one time?
And that's a great point that you mentioned. Sorry, Sham, I don't know if you wanted to.
And that would achieve what you guys were trying to achieve here, basically.
Yes, I understand. I thought of that. But then I thought that will mean 100% increase. If I have a 1,500 square feet house, I'm actually doubling my house to 3,000. And I didn't know if that's a good message to pass, where we're saying that we're increasing for this thing.
I'm just trying to reach a compromise here to get to his 3,000 number.
It's good, Mazi, that you are thinking about the compromise. But again, remember what I was saying to Dave. You are opening yourself for legal challenges in court. Because now I can go and double my house, I won't pay the fee. His house burned, he won't pay the fee. His house, the ants ate it, he needs to rebuild it, he's paying the fee. My lawyer will go and sue you, will go and sue the city.
So why can't he use the point number 3 and build it?
Because he's demolishing his house. He's demolishing the house and rebuilding it.
Oh, it's not an addition, that's right, okay.
Yeah.
That's why I'm saying make it one for everyone. Make it the same number for everyone. you're going to say, okay, we will make it 1,500. I'm going to say, I disagree, but there's nothing I can do.
On a slightly different topic, on the second bullet, my thought would be to remove any wording about aging in place and just leave reasonable accommodation. Because there could, well, not,
No, but he said that there is a code.
there's code around.
Reasonable.
Yeah, there is there. We already have a whole chapter in the code, a whole section on the code on reasonable accommodation.
But remember, now my lawyer is already involved. The moment we start wanting to interpret these legal terms, my lawyer is already involved. Do you think he will walk away with just one meeting with you? He won't.
Sean, I'm trying to make the second bullet more flexible.
I know, but I'm telling you, we are putting the city at risk, in my opinion, and I'm not legal. The city has legal who can advise on this.
But the city already has that in the code.
What the code exactly says?
I haven't memorized it, but I've tried. It's somewhere along the lines of that someone who has a reason for themselves or their family to modify their home in a way that would accommodate their needs shall be allowed to do that. And I think it comes from federal law and ADA.
It's based on ADA.
It's based on ADA, but we are far more flexible in that regard. We've had multiple cases in the time I've been here, whether it's a dock on the shoreline, whether it's a home next to a wetland, whether it's a floor area limit that needed to be
How about my
expanded.
4 dogs and 2 cats? Those are my companions. And you need to be reasonable to accommodate them.
They are, all the family members are defined under federal law, and there is a reference to federal law, and there is a lot of case law on this as well, as I understand it from our legal counsel. So this is not one that really makes me worried about liability. It's pretty tested water for us.
So another compromise, John, on the word for aging in place, if you were to just say seniors, and I'm assuming that there's a legal definition of the word senior, what are ages? So Ajay, at 30 years old, you're not aging in place, as you mentioned earlier, but it's like, what, 60 or 65, whatever that is, then it becomes more quantitative versus just saying aging in place. Is that something that, John, you're thinking would be a compromise?
Well, I think you'd almost have to separate bullet 2 into 2 parts, one for the senior and the other for the reasonable accommodation.
Accommodations.
Because they could be entirely different. Sudha?
I was going to ask David. David, your legal counsel has reviewed what these reasonable accommodations are, right? So we should be clear on that. We should be good to go.
Right. We usually route a reasonable accommodation request to legal counsel, and then they review the documentation and then basically say, yeah, this meets the legal test of a reasonable accommodation.
Mm-hmm.
So
Thank you.
I don't know. Is it not codified to say that this is section 3A, B, or something like that?
We could just list this section, reasonable accommodations as allowed under 21A 15.
Because, exactly. Because more and more loose definitions come. You remember I said about the discussion being between me and my wife? It's failing all those tests. So it's better if we put that in there into saying that this because that'll at least give some confidence about it.
How about a suggestion made? I don't know, Mazir, did you make a suggestion to increase on the bullet number 3, to increase the 400 square foot to bring it up to match the what Sean was pushing for as far as the maximum square footage? I didn't hear any comment or suggestion.
I don't know if I put water on it by saying, it'll be 100% if it is 1,500 to 3,000.
Well, it doesn't have to go all the way to what did you suggest, 1,000?
Yeah, I was going to go to the 3,000, but you can stop it at whatever to make it 2,500 total. So it would be 1,000 square feet instead of 400. So that's about, what, 40, 50%? Like 40?
Yeah.
A simplification here would be to align at 1,000 square feet, since that's the ADU limit.
Right.
Yeah.
So the 1,000 square feet.
So you do 1,000 square feet.
Up to.
Or you do an ADU.
Yeah.
So just to throw out a scenario, if I'm buy a parcel and want to build a 2,750 square foot unit, a new unit, I would have to build it at 1,750 square feet and then hire another contractor to put an addition onto my new house to achieve that without paying the fee?
No. You could,
You're giving them ideas.
you could build a 2,750 square foot unit because now are ADUs exempt? They are because they're smaller. So you're building 2 units. So you could build a 2,750 square foot home where you have a primary and an ADU where the units communicate and they operate as one if you want them to. And this is part of the whole number about the exemption as well is if homes are designed properly, they can, one of the challenges we have, and we've heard a lot from the community members over the years that I've heard, is that our housing stock is not one that allows us to downsize or age in place or all these things, and that we have different life cycle needs, and that our housing stock is not representative of the various life cycle needs of the community members in Sammamish. And that one way to do that is that we have a stick and a carrot that pushes builders, and we have some projects in review right now that are really intriguing, that are doing this, where you could build, say you wanted to, under today's rules, build a 3,000 square foot home. You could build a home that is designed as a single family home, but also designed as a duplex, wherein the duplex units communicate with each other, and you would not have to pay the fee under today's rules, and you could then utilize the whole space of the home while your full family is there. And then as your children leave, you could choose to rent out one of the units. And then if you decided altogether that you wanted to move somewhere else, you could retain it and rent both of the units. And it allows for flexibility because it could be a 3,000 square foot home. It could be 1,500 square foot homes. You could live in both of them. You could live in one of them. You could rent both of them. And that is really one of the objectives that we're trying to achieve with the diversity and flexibility in housing stock. That is one of the reasons why we have that exemption threshold, because rather than pay the city the inclusionary affordable housing in lieu fee, you reinvest that money back into the home and you build out the infrastructure needed for a duplex, which really is representative in the form of a kitchen.
So how are we going to leave the bullet number 3? One option, leave it as it is. The other one is that possibly making a change. Nobody talks about that. Forget about the 400. How about the 15%? Do we want to kind of increase that and get rid of the up to?
Going back to Hisham,
I'm sorry.
back to Mazi's point,
Yeah.
should we change it to 50% and 1,000 square feet?
50% with no reference to the 400? That's 50.
Up to 1,000 square feet, I said.
15% to keep the 15%.
No, 50, 50. So change the 15 to 50 and 400 to 1,000.
400 to 1,000, yeah. Then that'll achieve the 3,000, generally come to the 3,000, and at the same time, it'll also give that.
I can go with that. Mike.
Oh.
Mike?
Yeah. Hey, thanks. I don't know if I caught all that around the 3,000.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I just put up a moment ago. Hey, the way I look at this is that the first bullet is about new construction. Whether I'm the owner of a piece of property or the developer, David, to your point, you can't really tell those apart. And I'm good with the 1750. We've talked about that. All of the others are talking about an addition. And Hisham, I know what you're saying. I get it about, like, here's somebody, in one case where an act of nature destroys the house. Another one is the house is just getting rickety and they want to do something with it. Those are different. One is, involuntary. The other is you're making a decision. And in both cases, if you're making an addition greater than the original unit, so each of the except for the first bullet, is all talking about additions, right? So if we view it as any kind of addition and lump those all together and not try to parse it with aging in place or other reasonable accommodations or acts of nature, then that simplifies things. And then the last thing that we need to do is identify what the correct amount is to exempt. And I'm not sure I followed around how we were trying to get to that 3,000. But I go back to, it's my property. I should have a fair bit of ability to do what I want to it, given that there's other code requirements about how much, developable space you've got, floor area, ratios and things like that. So that's how I would do this. It's like, okay, what exemption should we have for any type of addition, and make it fairly generous. And the reason for not exempting all additions is we just don't want Sammamish to get converted into nothing but 5,000 square foot homes over time, like some of what's happening in the Bellevue area and Crossroads area. So
which one of those remaining four bullets will you change? Because what I'm hearing,
I would just say exemption for additions will be no more than X amount, or up to X amount. I don't know what the right number is. I think there was some, I was having trouble trying to get to that 3,000 square feet, which seems actually fairly reasonable to me in terms of, addition that gets a home up into that size. So
we go with some kind of percentage?
If I can just piggyback on this.
Sure, go ahead.
I just heard the 3,000 is reasonable to him, okay? Then let me start from there and go backward.
Sure.
I started earlier, what's the goal? What are we trying to do here? I heard the goal is not about money. I heard the goal is to preserve houses in a certain size within the city. If we're going to say you can add 1,000 square foot or up to 50%, I mean, we are getting to the 3,000 in just a different way. We are not preserving that size. You are still going to go and buy that 2,000 square foot home and convert it to a 3,000 square foot home.
Yeah.
You might as well do what I said from the beginning, make it one size for everyone to accommodate all these different scenarios.
But the argument against that argument that you're making is that I'll do that as soon as I get the approval and add another 1,000 square footage, I turn around and sell it and walk out of it. So, the whole purpose is...
So I built the 3,000. Are you saying the argument against that?
No, I'm talking about that addition.
The addition he was proposing up to 50%,
right,
or at the maximum 1,000 square feet.
Right.
If my house now is 2,000 square foot, 50% is another 1,000. Now my new house is 3,000.
As soon as you get that one, you put it in the market and you sell it as a 3,000.
But those are the exceptions, guys. If we're going to go and design...
That is the argument that somebody can make. And I totally understand that's exceptions. How many cases like this we're going to have in the next 10 years? God knows.
Yeah. Here is my only thing. I think we're taking this in the perspective of as if Sammamish has like a downtown and it is this one and people are buying and coming and there's a buzzing activity around it. And so I'm going to make 2,000 to 3,000 and then I'm going to sell it off to this thing. I think 90 to 95% of the people who do this kind of work will basically want to live in a bigger place, live for ADA requirements, the considerations that we talked about, having everything on one floor and so on and so forth. They're trying to expand their current living condition to get to that point. And I think we should not obstruct that with a guideline, with a rule over here. And with that perspective, that's how I'm saying that the 2,000 to 3,000 and 15 to 50 makes a good round number sense that we can just go with. And then anything beyond.
Keep in mind, nowadays, many 25 and 26 and 27 years old, they are living with their parents. Those they need more than just that tiny little room. And if you tell me that my 3 older kids are going to live with me in the 1,750 square feet, that's not going to work functionally. Yes, we can all squeeze like sardines, but it's not going to work functionally in today's environment. And that's why I'm saying 3,000 is a reasonable number to accommodate all these different phases of life. Yes, let's incentivize developers to build the middle housing that we talked about last year. Those will be the smaller houses for you and I, whose kids are grown-ups, and it's just me and my wife, and we need a smaller house where we can move to. But again, let's have houses from different sizes.
Just a point of information, a couple of weeks ago, I saw an article, I don't know where was it, that Seattle was cited as, Sammamish was cited as one of the cities in the Puget Sound that actually losing population. That was shocking to me.
It's losing population. I talked about that earlier, because those who are younger, they cannot afford it. And that's why I keep saying, let's make it affordable. Let's not penalize people. Let's make it affordable for them. That's why it's losing. It will continue losing.
I know of a family which is living with kids who are earning members, and they are in the same house. It's a big house. They're not packed like sardines, as we were talking about. But at the same time, they're living there and they are finding it this one. I have a feeling that when it comes to it and they can afford it, they're going to move out and go somewhere else. And I'd rather like them be in the same place. And the expansion will help them. The 1,000 square feet and 50% will help these people. The 1,000 square feet and 50% will help the people who are trying to make it more ADA friendly. And 1,000 square feet and 50% will help people to age in place, as we call it that. And although I'm only 28 years old, I would love to do this thing. I'm just kidding.
Couple of points. We have about 20 minutes. We have two other items. One is an item to discuss as far as the regional center and also public comments. Can we wrap it up? What is the conclusion of this?
50 and 1,000.
Yeah, I can go with that. Yeah, that was my number. So
Yeah, that's your number.
And just to clarify, this is not the last time you'll get to talk about it. We have a public hearing planned for June 18th. So what we can do is bring back a modified version of, these potential exemptions based on what I think we've heard tonight, and you can talk about it again and vote on it at that point.
But I think this is the fourth time we talk about it,
Yeah.
if not more than the fourth
That's why we
time.
scheduled the public hearing.
Everybody's kind of passionate about it.
Yeah, we'll call it Mazi's amendment.
Mazi versus Hisham. Okay, so can we go to the third? Do you have enough direction from comments that you heard from all of them?
We'll put something up there and we'll see what you think next time. Yeah, I think we've honed in a little bit.
It's probably one of the most difficult topics that the city is tasked with facing. And this comes from the state, really, at the end of the day. So it does. It's HB 1220. And it's our inclusionary affordable housing requirements that are, right.
We are in agreement about the states. We are past that point. We're talking about 1,500 versus 3,000. I don't think the state has anything to do with that part.
I just, for those listening, the whole premise of this comes from long conversations we've had a while ago. So thank you.
All right, the third and final topic I think is a little easier. It is considering changing land use policy 10.4, which currently reads as pursue a PSRC regional growth center designation. And we'd like to change this for two reasons. One, this was kind of a legacy item. It was something that was brought up very early in the comp plan process with the idea that it could potentially make the city more competitive for grant dollars for infrastructure grants. It should have been removed along the way, though, because it is just not appropriate for the scale of Sammamish. It's too intense of a use that just does not fit Sammamish. We won't be a regional growth center. So we need to remove this policy and change it. We propose changing it to a policy that fits our current comp plan goal language, the future land use map, which is pursue growth in local centers and sub areas consistent with the future land use map.
So I'll make this really simple. I move that we recommend to the council as stated by Evan.
Do we have a second on it?
I'll second that.
Okay, Mike seconded. All in favor of the recommendation by John?
Aye. Wait a second.
No,
I want to understand the difference, truly. And I don't want to drag this. But you are saying right now, these are the areas that are designated, right? You want to remove these and leave it.
No, we don't want to change the areas we've designated on the future land use map as future sub areas like the Pine Lake and the Inglewood centers. What we're saying is that this broader policy goal of pursue a designation as a regional growth center isn't necessarily identified in a location on the map. It was intention that it would start with the town center, but it imagines a future scale of growth and development that is just far beyond what Sammamish will achieve. It's in the agenda bill, and I can find the language exactly, but it fits something much more like Bellevue or Seattle.
There are many things we are trying to do, like Bellevue, that we know that we cannot do them. So it's not just going to be this one. So are we saying, if you keep it the way it is, it will lock the future land use to those locations? It won't allow you to do the neighborhood centers?
No, but
what will it allow you that's different?
It just sets sort of inappropriate direct. I mean, this is our guiding policy document. To have a policy in there that we know is infeasible.
What this mostly does is, as part of the next Puget Sound Regional Council vision process, Vision 2060, they're going to be doing inventory of all of the different comprehensive plans and where cities stand on growth and all those types of things. And what this does is it puts the city into a box with other cities like Bellevue or Everett, or trying to think of comparable cities that are in a location that have the right level of transportation services. Redmond Town Center would be it's not quite, Redmond Town Center is more of a county growth center, and we don't even qualify for that, right? So this is an error in the comprehensive plan, and the concern is that if this remains in the comp plan, it's sending the wrong message about what the future of Sammamish isn't, what we intend as part of our vision with our comp plan. We meant for it to say that we want to pursue a pattern of growth in centers. And what we mean by that is sub areas, Inglewood, Pine Lake, Klahani, Town Center, neighborhood centers, Eastman Neighborhood Center. That is what we mean by growth in centers. We don't mean it in terms of a Puget Sound Regional Council Regional Growth Center, which is a very big deal.
And David, if I may add, what that might result in is that if we designate that, the regional growth center status could create pressure for higher growth targets, increased density expectations, transportation demands beyond current road capacity, and infrastructure obligations difficult to fund or implement. That's what I understand.
Transportation demands. How do you demand transportation beyond road capacity?
If you designate it as a growth center, then it does, I think, right? It forces you to do certain things.
It would result in different paths that the city would take going forward, right? So
Let me take a different look at it and answer your question. There are two requirements. I went through the process number of times with other cities. PSRC goes through the process as a part of their obligation to look at the Growth Management Act and create a center point of employment, center point of communities, and so forth. No matter what the city in here does, it doesn't meet those requirements. Those requirements, one is density, the other one full access to the comprehensive transportation, public transportation. We don't have any of them. So no matter if it is on the system or not, we don't qualify for it. The idea, correct me if I'm wrong, the idea that was, somebody brought it up, hey, do it that way, because they thought by having that as a designated regional center, is it a regional center, urban center? Regional center. The idea is that would improve our potential to get some grants. But
so is this map,
you don't qualify?
Is this map misleading? This map should not have even been here?
It is misleading, and it's this from the comp plan, and this is there different pages. Ignore the map.
It's a snip of the whole
I'm sorry.
page.
The future land use map is actually a completely different document.
I know that one is completely different from this one. That's why I'm saying, why do we even have this one here?
These are the potential annexation areas.
Which is the green box down at the bottom. So this is all one page.
It doesn't relate to it.
Yeah.
So
The map is not telling the story of the regional growth.
LU 10.4 does not relate to the map that is shown there.
Yeah.
So I got confused with the map, so I ignored the map.
Yeah, we need to-
Is the regional growth center comparatively like Crossroads? Can I say it's comparative to Crossroads?
Well, I think it
No,
says
more like Bellevue downtown, I would think.
well, it says in the box these centers.
Downtown.
Yes.
Yeah,
Ask David. Yeah.
Yeah, and look at the.
So it's not even Crossroads.
No, it's bigger than that. It's like Linwood Town
Then in
Center,
that case,
like Linwood
yeah.
where they put a train station now.
Yeah.
It's something like that, or
Yeah.
Northgate for that
So
matter.
A major employment center that supports or
Got
is
it.
based on the high density residential,
Got it.
and also full access to the public transportation.
Got
We
it.
don't have either of them.
Yeah, exactly.
not well done.
I thought we were talking of either being like Crossroads Center versus Eastman Neighborhood Center. So,
And I apologize for the map and any confusion that the potential annexation areas might bring to LU 10.4. We should have pulled
Just
that
cut that
off
out.
and
It's
just
not
had that
relevant. Yeah.
page. I'm sorry. Going forward, we'll make sure that is very clear.
So John made a motion, and who seconded?
I
would second.
he
Who
said,
seconded? All in favor? Mike, Suda,
Aye.
Yep.
Do you have any comments?
any comment? Mike, Suda, any comment about the regional center?
No, it's right to strike it. It was a mistake to have it in.
Suda?
And I think formally, Chair, we'll have to take this action at the public hearing with chance with notice. So we appreciate the eagerness to check one off the box list, but we'll do this at the next meeting. But I'm glad we are all heading in the right direction. So,
So you have a direction on that?
yep, we're good on that.
Okay.
And
Syed, we officially didn't vote on it. We were going to vote and then we asked Mike, so if you don't mind, you can.
We're just
wanna
making a
vote.
recommendation, so we should vote on the recommendation.
Oh, I'm sorry. All in favor of the proposal, the
Aye.
motion?
Aye.
I,
Okay, unanimous. Wow, that is a surprise. Okay, now is the time to go to the public and those that they want to make comment about the things that we talked
It's the
about.
time to extend.
yeah,
We still have 10 minutes. Let's see.
Hi, my name is Jim Wegner, and I'm an example of your discussion on exemptions tonight. I used to live in Sammamish back in the 90s. I got transferred away and moved back to be near my grandkids. 10 years ago, I bought a house down at the base of Inglewood Hill. It was built in 1953. When I bought the house, I thought it could be remodeled. It's 1,400 square foot Rambler. I've got a full basement. Can't use the basement because the foundation moisture. I have dehumidifiers going all the time. 2x4 construction. I've had a number of builders come in and they say, you got to start over. So I'm going through the process right now. I'm 72 years old. I want to build an age-in-place house. I want to take the 1,400 square foot, put a second level on it. To do that, I'm going to be assessed $50,000 with the exemption fee. Building in, and I get a letter from PGE every month that my house is so inefficient, I use 50% more energy than everybody else. I was hoping to put in solar energy. I can't if I have to pay for things like this. I have a budget. And you're making it very difficult to take an old, inefficient house, which I would think you would want to upgrade to use new technology, efficiency, and everything. But I understand why you're doing this on new construction with developers. They can build it into their plan. They can build it. They're going to flip that house and sell it. I'm not going to do that. I want to live in it until I die. And you're making it very difficult to improve that house by having these types of charges. Totally unplanned. I didn't even know it until 8 months after I filed for the permit that I was going to be charged. And I've been working 3 years with architects to come up with an efficient plan and make it an age-in-place house that facilitates all those things we talk about. To have an exemption, that means you have to get to that point before you get the exemption. You have to have the doctor's slip. I want to plan ahead. I want to build a house that will facilitate that before I need it, and for somebody else in the future too, and to provide for a caregiver. But it's just, we've got to be reasonable about what we're asking people to do with existing homes and realizing the realities. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we go to the next one on the list. I believe it was Jan, wasn't it? Yep.
Hello, this is Jan Bird from Sammamish, and I agree that there needs to be exemptions for aging in place. And I don't know, I was trying to understand if it's only a 400 square foot addition you could make. I'm not sure if that necessarily would be big enough. I've been in my home for 27 years. It's a tri-level. It's 2,350 square feet. And I've got toilet and laundry 7 steps down, bedrooms and the other bathroom 7 steps up. So my thought was, why not build on a bedroom as well as a bathroom that also is big enough to have a laundry facility? Do that on the first floor. And I don't know whether I need 400 square feet or 500 square feet, but it just seems like there should be some flexibility there, and that should be exempt. I don't want to take any more of your time because it's been running long.
Sue Hill?
I'm going to take you back to the quasi-judicial discussion earlier. I just want to say thank you to all of you. You work hard at this, and boy, thank you, David. I really, really appreciate your advice and wisdom on all of this. So I live right next to, right next to the IRIDE parcel. So we went through the first instance of the quasi-judicial review. It was a very turnkey process, and it sort of completely removed the SEPA evaluation. Even though there was a survey there, everything was not applicable because there's no project, not applicable because there's no project. And so, I think maybe the understanding of what this process affords, you could maybe benefit from just watching a few of them online, at least ours, since I guess it's the only one that's complete. We had 96 commenters from our neighborhood around this particular parcel. There were a lot of concerns from these neighbors, but it was it felt to us summarily disregarded as DNS, non-significant. And when you have 96 people with concerns and that you get that non-significance and what feels like a rubber stamp, it was troubling to us. The hearing examiner stated in the hearing, as he listened to all of our evidence, that he would have liked to have ruled in favor of staying with R1 based on the facts that we presented. We had evidence. We had wildlife experts come in and give reports. But based on that existing statute that we looked at, G.2 with Parts ABC, he had to rule for R4 because the 50% criteria, it didn't meet that. So he had to go with the letter of the law. So, I listened to everything you have to deal with here. You're using these really blunt instruments as levers to try and create some kind of uniformity, and these things aren't uniform, as you know, as you've been talking about. And so it's very hard to establish what's going to happen in a particular parcel based on percentages. So I'm in favor of getting rid of the percentages. They didn't make any sense. They're very blunt instruments. But you still need a way to have some kind of quantitative criteria that incorporates that bigger picture. And it seems like the quasi-judicial process is even more limited by removing Part C, I think it is, that you've suggested removing, which is essentially going to 0%. I still agree with that because the percentages are it's really hard to even decide what that really means. What needs to happen is a measure of additional criteria to be considered. And the SEPA summary list that was part of what we were supposed to review that says not applicable seemed to talk about many of those things, but it's no longer applicable. So my contention is that rezoning should not be given an excuse of non-project action as a way to blindly ignore potential impacts of increased density. We are still stewards, even now, just like Karen in 1971 was a steward and gave us what we got, as you stated. We are still stewards of Sammamish, and that includes our wildlife and our environmental aspects. So by streamlining for developers, the stewardship seems to be getting lost. At least that's what it feels like as a resident. So we risk setting an upzone expectation where we have to back out of some of these ambitious ideals that the developers may have by just creating this rubber stamp and removing Part C. So there's something else that needs to be added in. Rezoning should have some requirement of a SEPA light type evaluation. I don't know what all that might entail. David, you had some suggestions earlier that you talked about very early on in the meeting, potential things that could be added in. Maybe a potential buildable area declaration and possible number of units in a particular piece of land based on its characteristics. There is some kind of quantitative survey that Kate in our hearing brought up, and it had something to do with level 6, and there was a level 6 boundary, and if you met level 6, then it was considered a wildlife area. Maybe that can be considered and put back in. I request that we come up with some kind of semi-qualitative assessments when considering rezones, especially when large community response, like 96 commenters, is brought forth and not having it listed as DNS and ignored. Thank you for your time.
Anybody else in the audience? Paul?
Before you go? Yep.
Hold on, please.
Happy to wait.
Well, move to extend to 9:30. Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Enjoyed the meeting. This topic does have multiple dimensions, as Chris Ross, council member, he used to say to things. And I'm happy there's a hearing coming up the 18th and that the city council is going to see it a few times. As I was listening to the comments tonight over and above what I sent in today, I've got a few sort of shotgun facts that are somewhat lumped together. So I'll just go through a couple things interesting. The first 10 years in Sammamish, there wasn't a lot of development because don't forget the first 6 years, the city had a no-growth moratorium. And then we had a pretty big recession from 2008 to 14. So I agree that county zoning was an issue. But the other thing that was implied, and that I'm just going to state out loud, is a couple things that really did a good job besides missing middle, which does have a lot of the same protections, is development regulations, phase 1 and 2, game changers. Well over a 30% of net yield reduction on average on the same sites as developments prior. And then there's one elephant in the room. It's not negative, it's a positive. And it took me many years to see it as a positive, but I've seen it that way for a lot of years. We didn't mention it today, but it really helps control how much development happens, especially when there's critical areas. And that's the difference between net density and gross. We're one of the few cities that has net, i.e., if King County, if you're doing a development and you've got critical areas, and if you have enough land in the remaining land to get the same density you could have in unit numbers on your entire parcel, you can. But in Sammamish, that's just the opposite. So if you have a 5-acre parcel that went to R4 from R1, that in theory could have 20 units, but if half of it was critical area, you don't get to put those 20, you get 10. So we should all be aware that that's another factor, and I support going to 0 because the cumulative total of all things Sammamish really do affect on the growth. A couple things to, I think one of the largest challenges, and it got alluded to, is when older homes in many neighborhoods in Sammamish are going to get torn down and rebuilt. It's very easy if a developer buys that site, you know what that is, they can pay the fee. But I don't know how many people are going to, well, let me just say that's something we need to look at. And in Bellevue, it's slowing recently now because of a slow market. But have any of you driven through Lake Hills? It is an absolute game changer there. These houses on 8,000 to 9,000 square foot lots-ish are being torn down. They're paying $1 million to $1.3 million for the dirt, and they're selling houses between 3 and 5 million that are between 4,000 to 5,000 square feet. I'm not saying that's going to happen in many of our neighborhoods, but in some of our older neighborhoods, I could see that beginning to happen in the future, and that's something to pay attention to. For the remodels, the one-time exemption or the one-time change kind of strikes me wrong, that somebody can only add once over the life of a project. I think it might be smart to take a look at what's the zoning of that site. What could it be if it was new today, not that it's going to be, and judge how much a site can do over time as compared to what that particular site could be if it was torn down and started over. I don't think that would be that hard to do, and I think that would be a smart thing to do. And then the only other thing I will add on stormwater, not everybody knows this, but some do. Our protections are extraordinary, especially in Sammamish, well beyond ecology. But the standard is no more water comes off the site than pre-developed forested condition. And if you understand what that means, it's an amazingly small impact. All right, appreciate the chance just to shotgun.
Thank you. Mary? Oh, you have comments?
I submitted it. I can take a minute. I didn't put my name there.
Go ahead.
Just keep it short. Been a resident of Sammamish for 11 years, moved in with 2 small kids. They've grown up. A lot of stuff here. 29,000 in lieu fee for me. I was like, what the heck? So basically, we're just raising up the home because one of the cases, my son's back from uni. He's doing a massive project. He wants space. He's in the house. My daughter is in high school, needs a bigger room, has a big giant piano in the house, don't know where to keep it. So, we're just building up. And it's not something we are expanding. We're not really taking off trees and doing anything out there. It's just building up. We have got a deck, adding some space on the deck so that people have space to do the pianos and stuff. And I just want to point one thing. I had a longer submission to you all if you take time to read through it, but a very small detail. By not bringing up the limit, right, and keeping it at 1750, you appreciate that 1750 is enough for somebody who's going to start as a young parent or newlyweds or even single. But once you grow up, if you don't do it, here's what's going to do to people like me. You're kicking me out of the city. I cannot afford buying another house here. There's no chance. No way, right? I can only build. I can't buy. So what that leaves me is only one option: get out of this place. And then what are you doing with that? You're taking the money from the new builder. You're taking the money from me, if I'm able to afford, or people like me who are building up, and you're building affordable homes at 1750. Awesome. I support that. We need to do that. But you know what that does? You've created a cake governor. You are kicking out all the middle class because they can't afford to buy homes, and then we leave. You're bringing in people who need smaller homes. Maybe they can afford bigger ones, but they're smaller homes. So you've got the lower income covered. People who can afford 5,000, 3,000, pay 3 million, 5 millions will move in here. So you've got the rich. Where's the middle class? We're out. Believe me, 10 years from now, that's what will happen if you continue doing this. This is the same notion that is used for, as you know, that is being used for the economy today, that there's no middle class. The middle class is the one that's struggling. That's what you're doing to the city when you keep this kind of a rule. That's my only take on this, right? Can I pony up the money, reduce my house, do something here? Yes. Would I want to? No. The first opportunity, I'm going to sell the house and leave because I can't afford it anymore for the longer term. right? That's my only take. I had a bunch of other analysis I did. I went back into other cities, did a bit of research to figure out what's going on across the country. I put a lot of stuff in there. But really, the crux of this is you're kicking me out. That's what it is. Thanks for the time. I really appreciate it. This was amazing. My first meeting, I love the amount of passion and effort that goes into this. I really appreciate your effort. Thank you. Thank you all.
Anyone else? Oh, Mary.
Hello again, Planning Commission, Mary Wichter. So I looked up the first house. It was a Lennar home, a new house that I lived in was 1,411 square feet. It was single story, 3-bedroom, was plenty of room. And whenever we didn't have things going on in the 3rd bedroom or 2nd bedroom, we had people that wanted to live with us for cheap. So it ended up working kind of like community homes. I think where David Pyle had talked about that there was the 1,500 thing, and then it went to 1,750 because builders said that. It's super important for the new homes to do that because we're changing. And you described perfectly the lifestyle home and how it'll get used, and we need those. So I think that's important to keep. I didn't want to speak to the other measures because I think you spoke to those a lot, but I did want to talk about critical areas, one of my favorite things. When I first heard about the iRide thing, I also read part of one of the things the hearing examiner had written, and he said he couldn't even consider the critical areas. He just had to go on the stuff that he went on. And the problem with that is, like, the parcel below me that's 4.5 acres that they originally said was almost 5 acres, that they didn't know the streams were there. And if you don't know where this stuff is, it's just really hard. And when you get land, you want the land use of it. So in the old days, King County didn't have an online map. Now they have an online map, and the city has a Sammamish property tool. And you can just go through and you can turn on all your layers, and you literally can see what your house has. There's 5-foot elevation contours on King County. There's 2-foot elevation contours on Sammamish property tool. You can turn on erosion hazard, which is just the way you build, landslide hazard. There's a steep slopes thing, but those are very steep slopes. So if there are steep slopes that aren't on there, you can do the streams. There's even a tool with King County where you can draw a thing around so you can see the buffer area around it, because you can use that for notifications. So all this stuff is online, and it doesn't take a genius to use it, just you have to do it. And I can't even imagine somebody going in for a rezone and not even knowing what they could put on it. So they should be forced by your code to say, hey, this is what my current zoning is, and I want to use it this way, and then they should be able to draw it. And they need to go, oh, we'd have to take down that whole row of landmark trees if we did that. Trees are not a critical area, and because of that, a lot of people don't think about them. Then they say, oh, we're just going to plant double later, and then the building never goes through. And then we don't have a tree bank or a reserve area so they can pay and have those planned. So we're pretty much just losing the trees because they're not a critical area and people don't think about them. For stormwater, if you live in like Tamarack, where we had a lot of water dumped on us, if you're dumping more water on us, there isn't a stormwater system because we're a historic plat. So the people just can't go, oh, well, we're just going to build it. We're just going to easement, and we're just going to send the water downhill. When we first started doing development regulations phase 2, there were a lot of people that were doing the reasonable use exceptions, and they were all over, and I would click on the development map. And the people were like, I don't think there's a landslide hazard area here, so this is mismapped. And then if you draw perpendicular to even the King County contours, the place downhill that is the landslide hazard is at exactly where they want to put their stormwater, which is just not a good deal. And then if you live below them, you get water forever, and I'm one of those people. So it's really hard. There's a lot of stuff online, and just to tell staff, we've had some really great staff at the city and some people that stuck around. So Lisa Weir in 2015 talked with me, and she said, Mary, the projects need to focus on the place that they are, and then the city needs to know the area around it and what will work, because the city has other things in there. And then Stephanie Sullivan, when she was first in development before she went to development review, before she went to stormwater, she said, you need to know, what are you doing? Where are you doing it? Because whether it's a big little parcel or whether it's on a steep slope, you just can't go with that. So I think the 50% number and trying to find one number is really hard. You really need to look at the use of the land where it is, and the city needs to know the wider stuff, like there's no sewer around there, so you're going to be on septic, and if you're putting your septic uphill and putting water in your trees and you need a place for your stormwater, it's not going to work. We still have those stalled out projects in Tamarack that keep happening because we just don't have the surfaces. So I would really like, I would really like to see that the critical areas, if they're not in the rule, when the people put in the application for the rezone, that they have to actually make those maps, because when I get asked to put in public, I just send a lot of maps to people, and I'm not the only one who can do them. And then the people can see and use, and then that way they don't missell or misbuy or get stuck with a property, and they don't end up with failed development. So thank you for all your time and conversations.
Thank you. Anybody else in the audience? Gabriella, anybody online?
We have one hand raised, Tracy Taylor. We're going to go ahead and promote you to panelist, and you'll be able to come off mute and share your video.
So my name is Tracy Taylor. I don't live in Sammamish, but I work as a permit specialist and development consultant. And I have a number of clients that are in Sammamish and looking to either build new or do additions. And so I just wanted to speak very briefly, because I know time is very short, that I commend you on looking at further at exceptions, because I have a number of clients that won't be able to do additions or their dream projects, and as one gentleman said, would have to move and look elsewhere. And I feel that from the very lengthy and very thorough discussion this evening, I commend you and I thank you for taking a harder look at this, because it is very prohibitive and it will kill projects in your neighborhoods.
Thank you. Anybody else?
No more comments.
Okay, back to staff. Do we have any other item that you want to talk about, or is there anything that?
We previewed the long-term calendar on June 18th. We'll have the public hearing on these three topics, and then the first meeting in July has been canceled because it falls with the July 4th holiday, and the second meeting we'll have in July is moved to July 25th, so the last Thursday of July.
Okay. Anybody else has any comment, any suggestion? Anybody want to move to? Okay. Somebody wants to make a motion to adjourn?
It's my honor to move to adjourn tonight.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. Your honor. Your honor. Well, what do you think?